pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Good evening, everybody. If you notice, some of us are not wearing masks since school is out of session. And if you're fully vaccinated plus 2 weeks, and you are more than welcome to take off your mask and not have to wear it. If you are not vaccinated, we're asking you must wear it. We're not asking, you must wear it. If you prefer to keep your mask on because you're more comfortable that way, by all means, go for whatever your comfort and preferred level is with regard to that. But again, if you're not vaccinated, you must continue to wear that. Well, good evening. Our school year has ended. Graduations were last week and the weather held off. And I was not able to make Mondays because of work obligations, but I did go to Wednesdays, and Wednesdays was a beautiful evening. Even the clash of thunder held off. That was a little nerve-wracking, but it was a beautiful night, and I know that, speaking with Joe, Monday was a great night too for all our graduates. So, thank you to everybody who had a hand in putting those together. It really turned out really well. We will move on to our consent agenda. And we have a lot of items on here because it's just that time of year where we're starting to hire people, and we're also closing out different POs, so we have lots of warrants. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Thank you, Shannon. Do I have a second? Thank you, Nick. Any discussion? Joe, do you want to talk about some of our hires that we've already made?
Absolutely.
And those are ongoing for the summer, correct?
Absolutely, yep. We have a really good head start right now. 2 English teachers at Massac. The first is Stephen Castanellity. The English department is really excited to welcome Stephen back. Stephen just finished his first year of teaching at Seymour Middle School. And he rejoins us after student teaching at Massac with, I think, Laura Massey and Ken Ryder 2 years ago. Also in the English department at Massac is Andrea Delato, who comes to us from Nonawag, where she was a literacy specialist and content coach. I know Steve is really excited to tap into her expertise for research-based instructional strategies, blended learning, and educational technology. School psychologist at Jockey. So both of those people will fill the positions left by Marie Blake, who's with us tonight, and also Tracy Forsrum, who will be the new library media specialist at Jockey Hollow. Lisa Melillo's retirement at Massac opened up a position that Melissa Videra moved from as school psychologist from Jockey Hollow to Massac. So Jennifer Fisher will be serving as a school psychologist for both Jockey Hollow main campus and the STEM Academy. Jennifer was in the Reading Public Schools, where she served as both an elementary and middle school school psychologist. She lives in Monroe and brings a lot of experience with her. So we're excited to welcome Jennifer. Also at 2 others at Jockey Hollow. One is Alexandria Pires. Alexandria will be assuming a special education position, and for the life of me, I forget what the replacement's for. Someone came. Heather Sawyer, thank you, from the vacancy left by Heather Sawyer. Alexandria worked at Tisdale School in Bridgeport, where she was co-chair of the SRBI team, and has experience providing direct and explicit specialized reading and math instruction to middle school students. And finally, Taylor Wesley is a pretty familiar face to our middle school community. Taylor was a building sub at STEM since January of 2020. This year, at 2 separate occasions, she took substitute positions and managed all the craziness that 2020 and 2021 brought to us like a seasoned teacher. So she will be bringing her enthusiasm to 6th grade at main campus, where she will be a science and math teacher. So we're very excited to have those 5 new hires with us.
Great.
I have a question.
Sure.
Not on the agenda. I can't get into the Wi-Fi. Isn't it Massac Panthers?
No, it
It should just be
Public.
It should usually. Are you going into the Massac Public or the
Massac Public, and then it's Panthers?
Should just be Panthers.
I don't know, it's just like my emails aren't coming through for the agenda for some reason, even though it has the little Wi-Fi thing.
I'm sorry, I'm not a,
I have a hard copy of the agenda if you want it.
Yeah,
It's not-
yeah.
Joe, do you need yours?
No, I can follow along.
Are you, I'm sorry, are you sure?
Yeah.
Do you have Stephen's email as well, or like that, I could just read it from my phone? So, turn to see.
I'm sorry. Say that again.
The email,
Uh-huh.
do you have that? Otherwise I could just read it from my phone.
You talking about the email that he sent?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have it, I think. Let me try to pull it up.
All right, thanks. I'm sorry for the interruption.
all right, any other discussion on the consent agenda? All right, hearing none, all in favor? Motion passes. We will move on to our committees and liaisons. The finance board met, but there's but there's no need to go over because we're going to be going over every one of those items further on. Does anybody have any other committee reports? All right, hearing none, we will move on to public participation. If anybody wishes to speak, if you come up to the microphone. If you, it doesn't matter, and you need to just state your name and address for the record, please.
Ryan Fury, 427 Elm Street. Has a decision been made on mask mandates yet? Because I can.
There is no decision by our Board of Education
Okay.
regarding masks because that comes straight from the state of Connecticut, and we need to follow whatever the state of Connecticut's guidelines and executive order by the governor states that we must do. So we, on a local level, have no control over saying the kids are wearing masks or saying the kids are not wearing masks. That's directly from the state of Connecticut.
Now, Lyme, Connecticut has submitted a proposal to not have masks in the fall.
That is a plan, but ultimately the state of Connecticut is the final decision maker on mask mandates in
So
the
we
state.
have no local control over our schools.
No, not regarding that, because there is also federal money tied to, if you don't follow, you do not get the federal money, the ESSER funds for our schools. You must be in full compliance with all state mandates with regard to COVID.
Are we pushing back on to Ned Lamont on that? Have they provided any evidence that this is working?
Well, first of all, public participation is just you make a comment.
Okay,
It is
that's
not
fine.
a back and forth. So again, there's nothing we can do. We're in a holding pattern because it's up to the state to give us the direction as to what their rules, regulations, and guidelines are for school for the fall, and they have not given that to us.
Okay. I'm just going to read a statement then. Is that okay?
Yep, absolutely.
I'm here to oppose the continuation of the mask mandate. During late May, my middle school son had to quarantine for 10 days because of a close contact while wearing a mask. Based on this policy, it would appear that Monroe does not think masks work. I know that you were waiting for the CDC and public health to release guidelines, but over the last 15 months, the only consistent message from these institutions have been inconsistencies. For example, 2 weeks to flatten the curve, masks don't work, then they do work. Next, they tried 2 masks. When multiple states started lifting mandates, it was referred to as Neanderthal thinking and extremely dangerous. After cases continued to decline, weeks later, the CDC changed their recommendation on mandates. We have been dealing with this for 16 months, and masks have been worn for a majority of the time without stopping the virus. These institutions have been politicized, excuse me, and waiting for them on a local decision is not what we should be doing. Please lift the mandates for the fall, like Lyme, Connecticut just did. And if these agencies try to implement them, you must demand evidence that proves masks actually work. I know I brought in a box of masks, and it actually states on here, not intended for use to prevent disease or illness.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else for public participation? All right,
Can I just ask a question on that one?
sure.
When do we expect do we expect, or what time frame, Joe, guidance around this?
Hopefully sooner rather than later. As of right now, the current executive order from the governor says that masks must be worn in school buildings until July 20th, during school time, obviously. So I'm hoping sooner rather than later that we're going to, get some clarification. I'm going to talk a little bit about this later on when we talk about the American Rescue Plan and the federal funds that are kind of tied with that, and some of the connections it has on the mitigation strategy. Something that, I understand the gentleman's concerns for sure. Something that's frustrating a lot of superintendents all over the state.
Sure.
Because it's really difficult to implement, ask for feedback from your community, only to be dictated something different.
Okay.
All right, hearing none, we will move on to our report of our superintendent. And the first up is our review of our May funds activities. So I guess I'm going to go with Ron as taking care of that.
Yep.
Yes, I am. So I'm going to roll right in. So if you turn to page 3 on the fund statement, I'm going to kind of combine A and D. So as of May 31st, we had a available budget of $2.9 million left. Projecting that out through the balance of the fiscal year, and this is it's a conservative number because I built in some contingency for unknowns still. We're looking at about $1 million surplus. So take that as you may.
Right. So we've already been in discussions, correct, about the giving back the furlough days.
Mm-hmm.
And how much does that amount to again?
So it's a little tricky because I think we're still working through. There are people actually opting out of taking the furlough days, right? So it's about you're looking at all 3 furlough days, about 500,000.
Oh, because some people are opting out of getting them back, or?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. So about 500, and that covers everybody being made whole that wants to be made whole.
Exactly.
Okay. And you're going to work on that so that that's done by the end of June so that it hits this fiscal year.
That is correct.
Okay. So then conservatively, we would still have $500 million roughly that would be returned to the town.
$500,000, yeah.
Or utilized for, I mean, looking at maintenance, I know there's some projects he's going to look to tackle before the end of the fiscal year.
I would say we probably want to look at some maintenance that needs to be done
Yeah.
and get that done.
Yeah.
Because if we don't, that could come back next year. So if he knows, Dan, it's Dan, right? That
Dan,
does
yeah.
that?
Yeah.
Dan knows that there's stuff that needs to be done and repaired. He needs to get that done and repaired now, so that it doesn't go into next fiscal year and start working on that stuff. Like at the high school, I remember us having a conversation about microscopes and things that haven't been rebalanced and stuff in years. Why don't we just move
Make sure
forth
it's
and
done.
do all that
Yeah.
stuff that we've held off on doing
Yep.
and get that done?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. And so the checks will be cut for everybody by the ends of the month.
So yeah, the game plan would be for the final payroll.
Okay. That's great news that we're
Great.
going to make all of our staff whole that
Yeah,
wants to be
terrific.
made whole.
Absolutely.
Ron, that's all the unions?
Yes.
That's
Now
right.
each union's
Specific
agreement was
agreement.
structured a little different.
Right,
but,
right,
yeah.
but that's every, yeah.
Yeah.
Great. That's wonderful news that we can do that, and that, all our unions were great partners with us to help us out. And obviously now that we know we have the money, we can give back the money and make everybody whole. Jerry?
Joe, could you or Ron explain the process that was done to ask if they wanted to?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I have a lot to Jack and Darlene and Jen and Sheila, basically, and actually sat, I'd be remiss if I didn't say Marie and Nancy and Ralph Franco as well, because we sat to look at, how we were going to, figure out, making sure that we can get the days made up, how they were going to be made up. So Jack and Sheila made up surveys, or I think Sheila, you made the surveys that went out, asking people, first, did they want to participate? And it's the large majority. There's a handful of teachers. I believe it was 10 as of this morning in the district that had other plans. Some of them were going away for the summer, or some of them had things. Some of them quite frankly are tired. It was a tough year, so they decided not to do it. But so first they indicated whether or not they were going to participate in the make-up furlough days, and then they had to design a professional development plans or work plans for themselves that needed to be approved by their administrator, instructional leader, principal, whatnot. Darlene is taking the lead. Darlene and Jen are taking the lead with the paras to provide a professional development day for the ones that want to, make up their furlough days, as well as our nurses as well.
You might have just answered my question. So if they want to get paid for the furlough days, those 3 days are then professional development days?
They have to work, yeah.
Okay, they have to work professional development days,
Yes.
and they can kind of maybe find something that interests them, and as long as it's approved by their administrator.
There's a ton of work to be done. When we met with the union, there was so much, the words that we're avoiding, because it's not true. I don't want to say learning loss. There wasn't learning loss. Learning loss is something we really want to avoid using, because that implies that there was some kind of learning regression, and that wasn't the case this year. Kids didn't regress, but there was a lot of unfinished learning, and there was a lot of, the teachers are going to be tasked with really taking a good hard look at their curriculum, finding out, okay, what didn't kids. I'll use Nancy as an example. She teaches, calculus. She's going to have to work closely with the pre-calculus teachers. What did they not cover in pre-calculus that she's going to have to, give kind of just-in-time professional development, so to speak, to the kids, or just-in-time learning to get them up to speed to get going with, with the calculus work that they're going to do. And that's going to, that's just, a small microcosm. That's going to happen K-12. So there's a lot of work to be done, a lot of curricular work that needs to be done.
Nick.
Since we're talking about the year-end money, the $500,000 in furlough days giving back, obviously, of course, 100%. And then that remaining $500,000, I know there's maintenance to be done, and I also understand that once we give money back to the town, it's not up to us how it's spent. But I think it might be interesting to have a conversation if we can't get $500,000 worth of maintenance done in 2 weeks, which we might be able to actually, to see if we could earmark any of that money to come back to us to look again at our teacher distributions. And if there is certain sections of certain K-5, we've had this discussion meeting after meeting about increases in class sizes and whatnot. It's difficult because we don't control it, but I think it'd be an interesting conversation if we do return 1 or 2 teacher salaries even after we do maintenance at the end of the fiscal year.
No, you're absolutely right, and it's something that we've been talking about. I'll be at the board of finance this Thursday, and I'll have a conversation with them about that too. Because you're right, the kindergarten numbers at Stepney and Fawn Hollow are just keep going up. It's someone sent me a really nice article today. I know a parent emailed all of us. Another parent sent me an article on the just the national trend of kindergarten this year because of the amount of people that kept their kids home last year. So our kindergarten and 1 numbers are concerning, and it could be 3 teachers.
Alan.
Do we have any updated numbers for kindergarten?
We do. Right now, we are at 23. If we were to leave it as is right now, which I would not suggest we do, we would be at 23 for Stepney and Fawn Hollow. And then the first grades are at 24 at Fawn Hollow right now. So we're legitimately looking at least
Yeah, I
3.
think you're gonna have to take a
So-
hard look at.
We have a conversation with, that's why I'm meeting with Board of Finance this week. You know, worst case scenario, you know, I know you're always asking for a plan. I think worst case scenario, it's, I'd rather not do it if we didn't have to, but if we have to, we have to. And that's, you know, this is clearly a byproduct of COVID. I think it would be a good use of some of the ESSER funds if we had to go that way. The problem with using the ESSER funds is they're grants and they run out, and when they run out, you kind of hit a cliff. So that's all has to be part of the conversation.
Yeah, but on the other hand, you can't put 24 kids in a first grade classroom.
Especially coming
It's
out
not
of,
gonna work.
yeah, especially coming out of what we just came out of.
Yeah.
So no matter what, we know that we're going to be, we've got movements to make down there. So.
Yeah, Dave.
I think obviously we honor our MOUs, right? We made those agreements, we honor them, there's no discussion with that. I did the maintenance budget with Dan, so we need to prioritize some of those issues. But I don't think we should recklessly blow the rest of the money, spend it just to spend it. I think we have an obligation to use our funding well, and if there's money to go back to the taxpayers, the money should go back to the taxpayers. I think that should be part of our discussion, Joe and Nick, with Board of Finance, to say, you know, we're going to do what we need to do, but this money's coming back, but we also have a concern over class sizes, we have a concern of this, concern of that. The town did put $500,000 in a fund for us, should we have needed it for spec ed or additional COVID funds, for medical. They've been a partner with us, so I don't think we should recklessly spend $500,000. I think one hand washes the other.
And you're probably not going to spend $500,000, but if there is repairs and maintenance out there that we've identified that need serious repair that we've held off,
I agree. Let's prioritize that.
We need to do that.
I don't want to sit here and say let's
because
you don't free for all and boom,
because you don't want it to go on any longer. Like if you haven't, you know, cleaned your air handlers units because we haven't, and then next month we have a major repair.
I agree.
We're just hurting ourselves. So get that done so that we're in a good position.
I just wanted to jump on that and say yes. And you know, if you look at your house and you can't afford a repair at that second. And I understand where Abe is coming from, I do, but we have put off some stuff for a long time, I mean, a real long time. And I don't want to just spend the $500,000 aimlessly, but you know, if we have to spend $2 or $3 or $350, whatever it may be, to fix those things we've neglected, then I'd like to at least look at the list.
And
that's a good idea, Jared. List.
David, to your point, I think one of the problems is that there's different philosophies on class sizes and on the amount of children that should be in a K-5 classroom. And one of the downfalls of our system from the board's perspective is that we lose control of what we hand back, right? And that's always been a frustration of mine, because if money's been appropriated for the education system, and if there's a surplus in the education system, if that money is given back to the town does not need to, or I should say the Board of Finance more appropriately, the Board of Finance is not required to appropriate that money for educational purposes. That doesn't make sense to me. And so I think the conversations need to happen early and often about the enrollment, because I think some people need to be convinced.
Yeah, I mean, enrollment's been an ongoing problem, and it hasn't been addressed in a while. It doesn't work. If you think it works, then you should go visit a classroom with 24 kids and spend a little bit of time in there.
Yeah, and I've pushed back and helped educate people in the town too, and say I don't want my kids in a class of 25. I don't want to have to hit that contractual max.
Right.
It's there, but I wouldn't want my kids, and I think you get a better education with smaller classes. So how do you balance out that ideal, and that's why I've asked it 2 or 3 times, how do you balance out that ideal classroom size versus, you know, we're all watching the budget at the same time. There's a balance there. So
I don't think it's ideal. I think there's been meta-analysis that's proven that classroom sizes should be small. I mean, can't really argue with a meta-analysis,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And
Nick, I think what you're saying is, I share in your frustration, you know, with we give the money back, but what makes sense and what state law is two totally different things. But I share in that frustration, but I think as citizens, we have a fiscal responsibility also. And Jerry, I think a list of priorities would be a good idea.
Well,
We can
because
look at.
the only thing that I caution you on, David, this money's not going back to the town, I feel, to taxpayers. It's going to the town and it will be used elsewhere where they think, I don't think we're gonna get a rebate on the money we hand back. I think it will be spent elsewhere, not where it was appropriated. This budget was approved for us. Granted, they put $500,000 away. We can abate that for years. They shortened that account, which is why they finally decided to put $500,000 away in an account. But I'm afraid to just give it back thinking, oh, the taxpayers are all gonna receive a little check. It's
No, I
not gonna
don't-
happen. They'll just spend it elsewhere. And that's my other concern. Then do we need it anymore? Did the Board of Ed inflate their budget? No. We are fiscally responsible. I mean, we really struggled this year. So I just want to be cautious, that's all.
And
Just want to be
with
cautious.
regards to the fiscal responsibility comment, we're not talking about creating a new budget, right? So like when in the budget workshops, when we talk about increasing the kindergarten teachers from 13 to 14, that's a potential tax increase to the taxpayers, right? This is a surplus. So this isn't, and we already have a budget approved for next year.
Right.
So I think that when we're in a budget workshop and we're looking at increasing teachers, which is increasing salary, which is gonna go out, that's, I don't know, I think that's a different conversation than having money that could come back to us to fill a teacher slot for the next year. That's money that's already been taken in.
Yeah, and that process will feed through, but I think we've laid the groundwork in having good conversations with the Board of Finance and being open and honest to,
Yeah.
that, I think that's coming back to us. And Jerry, I agree, we're not getting a rebate check.
No.
But.
I wish I could say we were, but it won't happen.
Right, but hopefully it could be used to help future budgets, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Understood.
Great. Excellent conversation. All
Could
right, so
probably-
will you have, I mean, I don't want to hold it up, but maybe email out Dan's priority list of what because again, my concern is if you don't do cleaning or a repair now, you could be looking at double the price 2 months from now when the item eventually does go. So we don't want to go crazy, but we do want to
Yep.
take care of those repairs and maintenance because we've really hit those accounts the last few years.
Absolutely.
Put stuff off. And that's just a time bomb waiting to explode, I think.
Yeah, no, Dan's been very proactive, so.
Okay, good.
Next was the Board of Ed budget review. Ron, did you want to walk us through that?
Sure. So I handed out to everybody basically a budget document which shows the budget that was submitted by this board to the first selectman, and then 3 different columns and where the proposed budget is today. So on page 30 of 30 in the last column, that is the appropriated budget, the total $61,521,068. Since it left you back in January, there were adjustments made which you now have to, approve. So walking through them, we'll just go from page 1 through 30. Should be pretty exciting.
Line by line,
What's that?
line by line.
There's a lot of pages
What
that
I'm
we
going
don't
to
have.
do is I'm just, so the 3 columns, there's the first selectman adjustment line, the Board of Finance adjustment line, and then there's a 3rd column, Board of Ed transfer line. Because there's some transfers we're going to propose that be made just between lines. That 3rd column zeroes out because the amount was appropriated after the Board of Finance made their adjustments. So on page 1, those 3 adjustments are just allocations for contractual increases. I think you're aware of those.
Yeah.
Page 2, that's allocating a portion of the union president's salary for union business. That's a net of 0, just to allocating that out. No adjustments on page 3. No adjustments on page 4. Page 5. This is the addition of an ASSO at Monroe Elementary.
So we have two school resource officers, one at Jockey Hollow, one at Massac. We had a third school resource officer at Monroe Elementary. Difference between the school resource officers and the ASSOs are that the school resource officers were police, active members of the police department. That person retired and they can't find someone to backfill the position, so we had to absorb for security purposes, the armed school security officer. So now all 3 elementary schools have an ASSO, and the middle school and high school still have SROs.
Page 6, nothing. Page 7, nothing. Page 8, nothing. Page 9, those are just unaffiliated and contractual increases. Again, netting out to 0 there. Just pushing out the payroll adjustment line to the salary lines.
And all this stuff that's happening, that's hitting the payroll adjustment, and this is done every year. This isn't
It is.
anything new.
Yeah,
It is.
because we just stick everything into one account
And then,
so that, it's not listed out until, and then what ends up happening is then we allocate it after the fact.
10, nothing. 11, that's just the other half of the union business allocation. The bottom of page 11 and the top of page 12, our life and disability insurance just got rebid, and that's just an adjustment for the new premiums. The retirement contribution, ADEC, that's an adjustment to actual. We got the actuarially determined employer contribution after the budget left this board. So that's just a slight adjustment. The workers' compensation adjustment, and later on the LAP insurance adjustment, those are allocations from the town for KERMA, who's our insurance carrier. So those are just adjustments to our workers' comp actually went down and our LAP went up slightly. Those are adjustments to actual. Medical and dental, as you know, we got updated numbers through the process, and this is just to reflect those numbers. There was an adjustment made at the Board of Finance level, and we actually had some room to adjust money out at the that I'm asking you to transfer now before you approve the budget. That's both in medical and dental in the third column there. 13, nothing. Page 14, technical service business office. That's a call it a contingency line item for the board. The first selectman made an adjustment out knowing that the town budgets for contingency. I was able to put some of that back in. That's kind of a plug item in the third column to zero it out, but it's basically the adjustments that we needed to make. There was money left over to refund that account. $15, nothing. 16, nothing. 17, nothing. Page 18, that was the LAP insurance adjustment that I was talking about earlier. That's an allocation from the town. Page 19, that's the Fairchild-Wheeler settlement. The town is picking up the prior year on their side. So that's just the current, that got adjusted to what the current year expenditure is anticipated to be. Page 20, nothing. 21, nothing. 22, Joe, do you want to?
Yeah, 22 is the, we already know that we've already moved a teacher from 5th grade to kindergarten at Fawn Hollow. That's just classroom setup, classroom materials, and supplies to help that person get started.
I'm sorry, that's from Fawn Hollow, they've been moved from 5th grade to kindergarten?
I mean, technically, yeah, there was, that's basically, yeah. I mean, there was 5 teachers in 5th grade last year and 4 in kindergarten. And with the 4th grade that's coming up to 5th grade, there's only 4 sections. Mm-hmm. So theoretically, that's what's happening. There's actually, it's a little bit more involved because it also involves the K-5 coordinator, which we were bringing back through some of the ESSER funds. So.
Oh, and then people have to be bumped down.
Exactly, and then, yeah.
Will that take, no, that's okay. Okay.
Page 23, that was an adjustment made at the first selectman level. It reduced the COVID supplies, again, knowing that there's a fund on the town that, we'd have to go to the Board of Finance, but the funds are there if need be.
It didn't zero out the COVID.
It did not zero it out.
They had put in there, yeah.
I think we had budgeted 53,000, so it reduced it about in half there.
But there's a contingency for that if needed.
Correct. 24, 25, nothing. 26, nothing. 27, nothing. 28, nothing. Page 29. This is related to the Honeywell contract. There's a portion of the contract which there's I guess it goes back to when the contract was started. We entered into a contract which we can terminate if it gets defunded. They provide us with what our savings is every year. There's no way for me to verify that or anyone else to verify that. So it's my recommendation to terminate that portion of the contract. So. And I think, I don't want to put you on the spot, Joe, but I think you're in agreement.
No, I agree. Yeah, I do agree. And it's already been, it was 10 years, I think we're at 8 years. And to your point, they send us a report that's hard to for anyone to verify, not you or I, even Dan. And it has historically shown that we've had savings every year. So I can't see that changing, in the next year or two. And it was going to expire in 2 years anyway.
And the reality is the year we just went through with heating buildings with windows open and, they wouldn't stand behind it anyway because they weren't doing exactly what they said they were supposed to do.
Exactly. So why bother? Okay.
And that's it. So, not that transfers can't be made during the course of the fiscal year, but this would be the budget that you'd be adopting that we'd basically load at the start of the fiscal year.
Same thing we do every year. Once everything is fully approved, then we allocate. Nick.
Joe, the line items, the FS adjustment column and the BOF adjustment column, that's you and Ron putting the numbers in from the cut that was given, right?
Yes.
Okay. Just, because they don't have line item control.
Exactly. That was the level it was made at, but the budget gets approved here.
Great.
There was a lot of conversations going along the way as we looked at, things like the Fairchild Wheeler settlement and, updates in insurance numbers and whatnot.
I just like us keeping as much power as possible, so.
All right, any discussion on that? So we will do our transfers when we get to new business.
Yep.
Actually, because the budget has not been adopted, you just need to
adopt the budget. Okay.
Dara, do you want to come up and the special ed update?
Okay, so So after the process of closing many POs, the special education department, as we have previously stated, will have a surplus this year due to COVID. This is mainly due to the number of students who remained on remote learning for this school year. The process of the ever-changing numbers in special ed will not be complete until the end of June, because we still have students who are in school. So students who are placed in other schools are still attending school. Some schools don't get out until June 18th, June 20th. So if you take a look at our spreadsheet, the one that I handed out tonight, and I'll just go down the lines that have changed from last month when Jen reported. Our outside agency line was reduced from a negative 73,000 to a negative 23,000. And this, again, is due to the closing of POs that we had opened, and then students did not utilize all those services. There was a minor adjustment in public tuition this month. However, all the savings in this line is from students that we brought back to district in the beginning of the year. So we had budgeted for some students in public, like CES, and we brought students back to district. The savings in the tuition private are related to the health and safety concerns surrounding COVID, and these students, we had several students who learned remotely throughout the year and did not take advantage of those programs. If you look at the independent evaluation line, one of my concerns is with the number of assessments that could not be completed this year, because an overwhelming number of evaluations were requested by districts in this state. So when you're calling a provider to do an evaluation, this year especially, we had, especially in the mental health field, we had evaluators say, I'm booked throughout the year. I can't do an evaluation till September. Some were June, July, September. I got September last month. So these evaluations are going to have to be carried over into next year's budget. We increased the PO for legal services to be sure we can cover the expenses through June. And then, as I stated previously, our biggest savings is in transportation. We weren't transporting students when schools and students opted into remote learning, so we had a lot. If you look at that number, that's the biggest number in our budget. The two other changes in the transportation lines, the life skills and the SPED summer, are due to the fact that we are adding an additional week of our extended school year program, which will begin on June 28th. So we will have those, for those first 3 days of our extended school year, we will have some salaries that we didn't budget for, and transportation for that extra week of programming. And then if you take a look at the enrollment, that's on page 77 of your packet. The special education enrollment increased from 446 to 496 students, which is approximately an increase of 8% from October to May 31st. Our schools continue to hold PPTs until the last day of school, and some are actually going to be completed this week and next week. And the number in Powers School today, when I looked it up today, was 502. There will be a decrease when you see the June number for 29 students that were receiving special ed services who have graduated. But there is an additional. Let me go back just a sec. So after we do the graduating students, that will bring us to 473 students when we take out the graduates, which is 32 more students than our October 1st number this year. So we'll be starting with that next year. Additional students means an increase in caseloads to our special education teaching staff and our related service providers, which could create that problem next year too of how are we going to provide hours on an IEP with a limited number of staff. Our typical referral number for school, every school year, I looked at the last 4 or 5 years, was between 50 and 55. This year, the number of students referred, and you'll see that in the third column there, students referred made eligible, is 77. This number continues to grow, and as there are 16 referrals still pending. Approximately half of those referrals that are still pending are for our preschool program, and those are the PPDs that are happening in the next couple of weeks, because as you know, when they come from birth to 3, we have to get that done in a timely manner. We do feel that COVID has impacted the referral process this year, and we are still unsure of what next year will bring us. So we, although we do have a surplus, it's always pretty scary about what will happen next year. So, questions?
Nick?
The independent, I lost it now. The independent evaluation line. Mm-hmm. So on the spreadsheet you provided us, it's at $45,000 was the revised budget for the year that we're currently in.
Correct.
But the budget that we're going to vote on later, you have $65,000 in that line. So will the difference help you cover? I mean, do you think that's enough to cover what you need to what needs to happen in the fall?
Like I said, the unknown is really hard. We've had several mental health evaluations to conduct this year, and we're not quite sure what next year will bring. For students who have been out of school for such a long time, especially students with difficulties, and they've been out of school for such a long time. Getting them back into school, we don't know what that's going to bring. We still have students who are on remote, even though we're doing in person. We hope that's not the case next year, but to answer your question, we did increase it because each year the number of outside evals that we do does go up, and I'm hoping, and we did put a little bit of money into the IDEA grant for evaluations too.
I just want to pick up on one comment you made about remote. Even if we have students who were fully remote this year, that's as of right now, that's completely done, right? SPED included. That's the plan for the fall?
Yeah, I don't know if you're talking about maybe kids that were in outside programs that may have still been remote, but yes.
Yes.
Our intentions in district.
These
will
are
be
outside programs.
Yeah, I mean, we're
Understood.
hoping, I don't know what, again, I go back to the state, did we get the okay to say that we're not?
Well, there's a difference between
Okay.
in-district and
Yeah.
Yes.
outplacements.
Okay. Yeah.
The legal services sped line, the budget that we're going to approve in a few minutes has a $20,000 increase from 80 to 100. So that's going to be proportional to the increase, right, in your special education students.
Right.
So that's, I guess, another one that you really can't predict until you know who's coming in.
Can't predict it, yeah.
And so $840,000 of our $1 million surplus is coming just from your spreadsheet.
Well, and again, these are just some of my lines, so when we look at all of my lines, I don't know what that total number is.
Well, just the lines that are on this paper.
Right, yes, yes. But some of my other lines are in deficit too, but small,
Yeah.
nothing. I mean, it's definitely COVID related this year.
Yeah. I think it's safe to say because of COVID, a lot of the outside placements did not decide, the families decided not to do that because of concerns for the children. So if that wasn't the case, this would be nowhere close to this type of savings in this.
But I think we also, looking at the revised budget on the spreadsheet versus what's in the budget we're about to vote on, we also increased where we felt we needed to increase.
Yes.
So we're covering.
Yes.
And quite honestly, the budget was done assuming that we were past COVID and everything was back to normal.
Right. Okay, great, thank you so much.
Thanks, John.
How many outplaced students do we have, approximately?
Approximately, I want to say 34, but I'm not. And there's transition happening right now. Some students coming back, some students. So yeah, there is transitioning happening right now. So I can get you that number though. If you.
No, you don't have, it's just ballpark is fine.
Anybody else have any questions? All right, thanks, Darlene.
Thanks, John.
we are going to stop here and stop with the report of the superintendent because it's almost 8:30 and Ron needs to get to the other town council meeting. So do I have a motion to move to the next item on the agenda, which unfortunately is going to be under superintendent's report, which was new business item B, adoption of the full year 2022 Board of Education budget. Do I have a motion to move that? Thanks, Nick. Second, Christine. Any discussion on that?
I just want to thank Ron, Linda, Margaret, Val, Maria, the whole finance department for making these final adjustments. I guess we take 2 months off and start at it again.
Nice break.
Well, we'll
Yeah,
have
versus
some,
bubble.
we'll have some salary
true.
adjustments through
Yeah,
the
we're not
summer,
done.
but this gets us going anyway.
All right, hearing no other discussion, all in favor of moving that item? Thank you, motion passes. Ron, is there any other item that you feel that we need to move that you want to cover before you need to go?
I'm sorry, you were just.
I'll defer to Joe. Are there any other items you'd like me here?
Probably C for the shared services.
Okay.
All right. So do I have a motion to move item C under new business, shared services agreement, director of finance position, to be the next item after the discussion on the budget transfers, or the budget it's adoption? Dave, second, Nick. Any discussion on that? All right, all in favor? Thank you, motion passes. So we are now going to do the adoption of the full year 22 Board of Education budget. Ron has already gone page by page through that. So do I have a motion to adopt the full year 2022 Board of Education budget as presented at tonight's meeting? Thank you, Nick. Second, Christine. Further discussion on what Ron has presented as the line item transfers and the adoption of this budget.
I think this is where I was supposed to say the nice things about Ron. Sorry.
Thank you for all your hard work and for
Yeah.
all the detail too, because
Yeah.
now we can take this document as we go throughout the year.
This is amazing because quite honestly, I think that by adding the 3 columns and knowing where all the adjustments were made and clearly seeing them by each step of the process, I think was a huge help and is a lot more detail than we have gotten in the past and is very helpful in discussion and also review of this. Anybody else? Hearing none, all in favor of adopting the Board of Education budget as presented? Thank you, motion passes. We will move on to the discussion of the shared service agreement. Do I have, and we'll open the discussion after we make a motion. Do I have a motion to approve the shared services agreement, director of finance position as presented in tonight's meeting? And everybody would have got that email that I emailed out to them on that. Do I have, thank you, Dave, sorry. Do I have a second? Thank you, Jeff. Discussion on this. So I'll start. This was the agreement that, we have been talking about and have, is it 3 times that we've adjusted this
The MOU.
MOU? So this MOU expires, the current one expires, is it July 1st or July 3rd? Something like that. All right. So this is the agreement that has come out of the meetings that both Nick and Dave has served on with regard to making Ron the shared director of finance for both the town and the Board of Education.
I'll just start. I know there's some concern over I know we've talked about this for a while about some of the concerns over the shared services of the finance director position. I know over the last year and a half, I believe over the last year and a half, we've demonstrated many more and seen many more significant advantages rather than disadvantages. I think the 2 biggest ones, from my perspective, have been credibility and collaboration. I think for years there's always been skepticism on both sides. How are they spending their money? Why are they spending it like this? How come they're hoarding money? How come we're not getting more money? Having this position has really eliminated a lot of that. And I think this year's budget process was a good example of that. We came out of the gate with a 6.19% increase. It got trimmed a little at the various stages, but all through very open communication and conversations and adjustments that reflected those any current changes that were going on, like the updates in the insurance or the removal of the legal settlement. So if my math is correct, I think we're we finished up around a 5.16%, over north of 5% budget from last year to this year. I don't think that happens without this. We haven't seen numbers like that, and probably overdue, but we haven't seen numbers like that for a long time. And I do believe it's from the the trust that's been built between the town and the Board of Ed with Ron in the position. And I know we don't want to we want to talk about the position, not necessarily the people, because it's gotta live after some of us, and I understand those hesitations as well. But I think this agreement addresses some of that. Most importantly, it has some escape clauses that if it's not working for the town, there's a way to move out. If it's not working for the board, there's a way to move out. If it's not working for either, there's a way for it to move out. So I think those clauses in there, I think it was number 6. I'm sorry, 7, 8, and 9. Talked about the procedures that would go into effect if we had to, if we had to change the arrangement and go back to the original arrangement where we each had separate finance directors. It would be nice, from my perspective, to have some finality to this, to get some of those other people in place and really kind of articulate those and have those people, firmly entrenched in doing what they're doing. I know Ron during the policy finance meeting talked about some of the other work that was done. We've got Linda picking up a lot of work, and Margaret Wozniak, who's really stepped up with facilities, food services, and transportation. 3 big areas to kind of ease the burden off Ron to some extent.
Discussion. Nick.
Okay, thank you. I wrote what I wanted to read tonight, but I do that and then I extemp anyway. So we'll see how it goes, and I'll talk fast. To start, I want to just say that this has nothing to do with Ron. We say that every time. I missed it one time and I corrected myself, but I want to start there. But I think this is about the new position we're trying to create. I wish that we had a little bit more data of comparable districts that do this with regards to FTEs and salaries. I also feel that our attorney should have reviewed this agreement. With regards to the proposed salaries, the salary that's proposed for the joint director of finance is $15,000 less than what the board budgets just for their director. And so I'm hoping in budgets to come that can go up. I wish we could do it this year, actually. We're still down a person from when the Board of Education had its own full-time director, and the proposed $67,600 budget savings exists because we're not hiring someone, which I believe we should be. Arguably, we should be hiring one person on both sides, on the town and the Board of Ed, and if we do that, then this really isn't a budget savings. And if it's not a budget savings, then why wouldn't the board go out and find a director of finance that can be dedicated to the board side 100% instead of only 60%? As I've said many times, at best, the amount of work has stayed the same, but in almost likelihood, it's probably increased. And we've seen that just with the COVID funds reporting that has added another layer to the jobs. The cycle that both finance departments go through is unrelenting. We know that. It starts with fiscal year end and summer audit, which goes into the actual audit, and then BOE budget prep, and then BOE budget workshops, townside budget prep, and townside budget workshops into the referendum. There's also monthly closings for both sides, bonding, and everything else. So if you line up the Board of Ed Director of Finance and the Town Director of Finance job descriptions, I personally think that it's too much for one person. Next, I'd like to go over some of the provisions in Section 6 of the agreement. The agreement, and I said this in the Finance Committee, the agreement that we're going to vote on tonight requires the Board of Education to approve a job description, which I'm sure will come to us at some point in the near future. Let's see what's next. By agreeing to this arrangement, I believe that the board, through the superintendent, is ceding its authority to hire a certified staff member. In our job description, this person should either have an 085 or be able to obtain an 085. And so no longer will the superintendent and the board be able to hire their own director of finance, which is a certified position. And I think that that's quite a dangerous precedent. There are other charter concerns I have that come from Section 6 of the agreement. Section 6 delineates that the shared director shall be under the direction of the first selectman, as is articulated in our charter, Chapter 5, Section 2. It then goes on to say that the first selectman will delegate his authority of direction and supervisory authority of all matters related to the Monroe Public Schools to the superintendent. It's my opinion that the charter doesn't contemplate this. If you have an agreeable town council and that town council votes to allow the first selectman to delegate his authority to somebody else in town or to another employee, then what is the first selectman's position? Chapter 3, Section 4 of our charter unequivocally states that the first selectman shall appoint a director of finance. And I don't believe that the authors of our charter thought that this appointment power would ever be joint in any way. This agreement allows another person, the superintendent or a body, the Board of Education through our consent agenda, to have a veto over an appointment of the first selectman. So the point here is that the charter sets out a floor of duties and responsibilities and powers of the first selectman, but not a ceiling. And by delegating his authority to someone else, the first selectman, I believe, is breaking that floor, which he can't do. The charter also states, quote, the council shall not diminish by ordinance, vote, or otherwise the powers and duties vested in the first selectman by this charter, end quote. And I believe that this agreement does that. So it says that the first selectman has to get approval from the superintendent to hire a department head, when the charter states that the first selectman shall appoint. So I think that's a huge issue. The only answer I come to with that question is that the finance director will be under the supervision of the first selectman, and then the Board of Education, we've given up all of our autonomy over the finance director. What happens if there's contradictory orders that are given from the first selectman and the superintendent? So I believe that this agreement is in direct contradiction and violation of our charter. And I believe that it opens us up to unnecessary liability potentially in the future. I think the plan that we've had in place for the past year and a half was on an interim basis, while we worked through this. I think the COVID crisis gave us more of an opportunity to explore this. But I think there's real charter concerns there. I'm also very concerned about hiring the next director. Again, we've said time and time again that we can't build a department around people. It has to be around the positions. How are we going to get someone qualified to be the next director? That's a very big concern of mine. I think there are a host of many other issues that this agreement doesn't contemplate. If there's disagreements between the first selectman and the superintendent on salary for this person, what if one side places the finance director on paid administrative leave but doesn't terminate them? We did that just last year. The agreement doesn't contemplate that. The charter also talks about the classified service, but exempts Board of Education employees. How does this person fit into that in Chapter 10? So, as much clarity as this may seem to bring, personally, I think it makes things a little bit messier. So, I think that we should not adopt this evening. I think that we should create a search committee. I think that we should extend our interim agreement with the town for another 90 or 120 days, and that we should be hiring our own director that can dedicate 100% of their time to the Board of Education. Thank you.
I just want to address the 085. The Director of Finance does not need an 085. The only time the Director of Finance needs an 085 if they meet, I forgot what the number is, but there is a certain amount of criteria that if they actually do, those criteria, certain amount of them, then they have to have it. If they don't do that criteria, like transportation, food services, that type of stuff, the person does not need to be 085 certified.
So the only reason I said that was because our job description on the board side, the qualification is certification as school business administrator.
Right, but the joint person who's not going to be directly handling that does not need to be 085. And if you restructured the department, so let's say Margaret, who has been restructured, doing a lot of that work, that doesn't necessarily qualify that we would need an 085 because she's taken a lot of that functionality that would fall under Director of Finance. The Director of Finance would not need to be 085 certified, only if they're meeting all that criteria as their specific job description. So there's a number of districts in the state of Connecticut where their Director of Finance is not an 085 certified employee.
So I think that perhaps when we evaluate the job description that's going to come to us, I think that just needs to be made clear. Because like I said, the board job description has that requirement.
Mm-hmm. But that was, I think, changed because we've had 085, we've had Director of Finances who have not been 085 certified in the past, and then what ended up happening is the job descriptions by former superintendents changed their job description that kind of moved the person into a certified area because of additional functionality with regard to facilities and other things that then added to that criteria that dropped it to the 085 bucket, so to speak.
I think it was more of a want than a requirement.
Well,
where did you read that it was required?
Well, our job description, Monroe Public Schools, has qualifications, certification as school business administrator, which is the title of the 085.
Yes, it's right in our job description.
Right. But that was, I think, adjusted because you don't need it. You have to, there's like a whole list. If you look under the certification, if a business manager meets certain amounts of requirements that they directly do, facilities, transportation, food services, and there's like a whole list. And if they meet all of those, then they have to be certified. But if the person doesn't do all those, they don't need to be certified. Because there's lots of districts that have a business manager and a director of finance, and they do different things, and the director of finance does not need to be certified because they don't do the functionality.
Right, like our previous director of finance needed that certification, right? Because
was
we
our
had
previous director
all
of
those
finance
responsibilities
085
under her.
certified?
I don't know.
Who's it?
Gabby, did she have the 085? Because she had more of those jobs where you were.
I thought she had it while she was in the,
I think she did.
believe she got the certification while she was in the role.
But
you
after
have
the
a certain
role
amount of time to
changed,
get it
not
as
at the
well.
beginning, after the role changed and that person got additional responsibilities, then they had to go out and get it.
Yeah.
If when we hire the next person, if we are interviewing people who have the certification, then if we hire someone who is 085 certified, then we would need somebody else to allow us to hire that person. That's kind of the point I was making.
Right, but based on the new job description, you wouldn't have that requirement because that director of finance person, whoever that is, does not do all those things that would be required of that.
Right,
And we could, so let's say we hire our own person. That person doesn't have to have the 085, right? Well, first of all, it doesn't have to have an 085 unless they're doing all the criteria. But it also is as long as you can meet the qualifications to get an 085 down the road, you can hire the person and the person could get their 085 in 6 months from now.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to, it doesn't like, person doesn't have to walk in being able to be 08, have to have
It
the
wasn't a
085.
priority. I mean, if they had those things under their job description, then they would have to get it eventually, but that wasn't the priority of what we were looking for in
Right.
that position.
Because when we were hiring when we were doing the whole committee beforehand, we were saying we just need to find somebody who can eventually get that certification, but all those candidates, not all of them had 085s.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So Nick, did you see the job description in
Like, the ones that did were not the pick of the
All right,
Yeah.
wait, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ron.
So in the job description that's before council tonight, it does say either CPA, certified public finance officer, or school business manager is preferred for that position.
So that means that going forward, should this role change at all where the 085 is certified, the job description needs to be adjusted if things go back into this role?
But again, it all depends on how, let's say we split it. It all depends on how we choose to structure it. Do we structure it the same way? If we already have somebody in a job that's doing the functionality, do we take that responsibilities away from them to move it to a director of finance just for standalone purposes? You still may not have somebody who needs to be 085 because you have a person who does a good chunk of that qualification. You understand what I'm saying? So I wouldn't, so whether it's Margaret or somebody else, are you gonna take job responsibilities away from, let's say, a Margaret to give it back to a director of finance when she's been doing it and successfully doing it? So if you're not doing that, you don't need the person doesn't need the 085.
But that also depends on who the next Margaret is, because depending on...
Right,
Yeah.
and that's what I'm saying, it's going to depend, it doesn't necessarily need to be somebody certified, it's going to depend if those things ever happen down the road, where let's say a Ron leaves and you're hiring somebody, or a Margaret leaves and you're hiring, it's going to really all depend on who is taking those positions, but you can't really foresee that at this point, that it's going to have to be somebody 085 qualified, certified, because you don't know. Jerry, I'm sorry.
So I've struggled with this. Ron, you know you're a rock star. You know that. You are a guy. So this is not about Ron, but I am struggling with this whole process. I am not sure if I was Coke, I'd want to hire Pepsi's finance guy to intermingle with me. And it's kind of, and I know that's way out there, but just hear me. Ron, why do you have to go up to town council now? Could you answer that for me?
There are, well, part
Is
of
it town business or is it our business? I don't mean to put you on the spot.
It's actually a little of both.
Of both.
Because there's bond resolutions, and one of those bond resolutions is a Board of Ed bond resolution.
We all know that Ron is like a little tiny super ball. He bounces, I don't even know if he sleeps. And I'm still struggling with how this is gonna work each way. I know Ken, I'm friends with Ken. God, I've known Joe forever. This is not about any of the three. It's about doing the job and doing the job, and I don't want to say the right way, because God, that's all you do, it is the right way. And I don't want to say stress-free, because it can't be. But it's giving 100%, there we go. It's giving 100% to us. So Joe or Ron, really quick without making this till 1 in the morning, and I've read it 1,000 times, but I want you to say it out there. Go over this structure of what's going to happen. Ron can't do the town hall by himself, and he can't do Route 111 by himself. So I know it's here, I got it, but I need you to do this again. Tell me who's going to be hired. We're saving $67,000 after we wind up all said and done, roughly. Nick, is that about right?
That's, yeah.
Roughly. So go over the structure with me quick. Just saying, Ron, I know I'm making you late. So Joe, if you want to do it so Ron can leave.
No, it's okay. So Director of Finance.
Gotcha.
Split 60-40.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to get into the town side.
No.
Board side, the assistant director would be the assistant director of public school finance. The business operations would be the coordinator of business operations, reporting to myself, the assistant superintendent, as well as the director of facilities. And that's the way it's been operating.
Yes. Yeah.
A bit. And the right now the plan is to have the payroll specialist report to the assistant superintendent, and to have the accounts payable specialist report to the assistant director of finance. That's the structure.
This is a tough one for me, Joe. I don't know, man. I'm not sure if I was the Giants, I'd want to share the offensive coordinator with, the Patriots or something, 2 different leagues. I got it, but you know what I'm saying. I'm just not sure I'd want to do that. And it's just me. I'm still struggling with this. But thanks, Ron. Appreciate it.
I just look at like I said before, the last 18 months have proven that this is there's the benefits way, in my eyes right now, and the way it's been.
Well, that's all that matters right now, Joe. It's to help you through the process. I mean, I'm trying to, that's what I'm trying to.
Yeah.
And remember, the agreement does have an out.
There is none.
There is an out, so it's not like, oh, we're locked in and we're never out.
Yes, that I've seen it,
So
yes.
you can.
I love exit plans. I absolutely love exit plans. But so if I have it correctly, and like true or false, is this correct? The way it's currently working with Ron in place and working for both, we and our other staff members in place at the Board of Finance, like Margaret and so forth, we have our system of checks and balances in place that we need on the Board of Ed side. And we had in the past a director of finance for the town and a director of finance for the schools, and maybe they weren't always on the same page or in good communication with each other, and we have a good working relationship with the town. So with Ron doing both, we have the liaison and the connection with the town that we sorely needed. And we have the system of checks and balances in place and the support staff that we need to keep the, it's not just one person running the director of finance. We have the staff that we need to keep the finance department for the Board of Ed running as it should. Am I right?
Yes, you're right. And that's what I think has been one of the positives of this, is the collaboration, the communication between the two has been outstanding. I do think once we get this into place, will we see that there's a need for another position? I don't think anyone has ruled that out yet.
And we can't keep kicking it down the road. I mean, it's working really well. And I agree, we're not going to build it around the person. We need the job description to be what we need it to be for the Board of Ed to function properly. But I think with the right checks and balances systems in place and the support that Ron needs, I mean, hopefully the town's giving you the support you need on that end as well, but you can't single-handedly do both jobs,
No, but the staff on both sides has been great, really. And there, it hasn't been a perfect situation. I'm not gonna, say it. There's been bumps in the road, and I would anticipate there'll be more bumps in the road. I mean, what we've lived through over the past, 15 to 18 months.
Oh my God, you took that over just as everything hit the fan,
I would expect things to start to normalize, I would hope, which I think would make things operate a little easier, but.
Well, and the communication's important. When there's bumps in the road, you have to.
Absolutely.
There's always going to be,
whether
we have one or two directors, whether each side has a director of finance or not, there's always going to be, we had an insane year and a half.
Alan?
I think it works great with Ron, and I mean, like I said before, it's like having Ron's like having Mickey Mantle in your lineup. But my concern is what happens when if Ron gets up and goes to California, or Ron takes another job, or eventually retires or does something else. Then we're going to be in this situation.
Well, then
how many people are going to be able to do both jobs?
Well, and then that's when item 9 may come into effect, which is the board and the town can't mutually agree on a person, so they have decided to terminate the contract and each hire their own.
Yeah.
That's when bullet point number 9 comes in. The town may say, listen, we have this great person that we want to hire, and the board may say, listen, and this is on a committee, because obviously it's going to be a hiring committee jointly by both parties, and the board goes, there's absolutely no way that this person, which may be great for the town, is going to be great for the Board of Ed. We cannot move forward with that person, and we come to a stalemate. Then at that point, you're enacting item number 9, which is we'd like to terminate this agreement and go hire our own person. That's why there's the out in there.
Just one more brief comment. I've heard this for a year and a half about, I understand the collaboration with having Ron in both positions is good. But the idea that if the Board of Education had its own finance director, then the collaboration would be bad, I think is a false assumption. I think that if the board was to hire its own finance director, part of the job of that person is to familiarize him or herself with the town hall and with the players on the town side. So it's not an automatic that the Board of Ed having their own finance director means that collaboration and communication is not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I think perhaps it could be, instead of taking a few minutes, a few hours, or even a couple days, depending on the busy season, it's instantaneous now because it's the same person in both roles. But it's not that it would automatically be bad. I think you have to have the right person in the role, and if the right person's not in the role, then it's up to the well, it's really up to the superintendent, and perhaps secondarily up to the board to get the right person in the role to be able to have the relationship with the town hall.
Agreed.
That's
That's part of any
Right.
role between the two organizations that has to interact between the two organizations. I think the point of what you were raising though, Nick, is the synergy's there now, right? So we're taking full advantage of the synergy now. That may change in the future if Ron decides to step aside at some point and we need to fulfill a succession plan or contingency plan, then we do that, and perhaps we hire our own resource. And that would be an expectation of the job, is to be able to go out and work with the town.
But then doesn't that mean that we're building the department around a person?
No. No, because you're surrounding that person with other capable and competent people that are building skill sets to do portions of everything that a finance director would do. So if Ron were to step aside, you now have built a bench of people that are taking on certain aspects of that role that would otherwise do everything. So we have a built-in contingency plan.
And then I think, and I mean, this is just from my point of view, the last time we tried to hire a position, the pool of candidates was not good, and we really did not get qualified individuals, you know, in that pool of candidates. This is a kind of a difficult position to hire, so you could be, the learning curve, if you don't have an 085, and if we remember we had one person who had an 085 apply, everybody else didn't, the learning curve of trying to get that person up to speed and then have to build that relationship is going to be a huge learning curve too. David.
I'd like to see us approve this tonight. There's always concerns and opinions. And the other thing too is that what no one said is that this could always be tweaked. There's nothing saying that this is in stone. I think we are gonna hit bumps. There's gonna be learning curves. We don't know how this is gonna work in a quote-unquote normal school year. Hopefully it'll get easier and work better. That's what I see. So I hope. But we can always tweak this document, and we can always exit. And if we exit, we're going to have to budget appropriately too. So that's another thing to consider. But
All right, anybody else? All right, hearing none, all in favor of approving the agreement? Thank you, opposed? Motion passes. All right, Ron, thank you so much.
Thanks, man.
And you can go. And Joe, we are moving back to report of the superintendent, and we're up to item E. Please.
Yep, just in front of you, everybody should have the safe return to in-person instruction and continuity of services plan template. Basically, in order to qualify for over $1 billion of federal aid from ARPESR, the American Rescue Plan, Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, every Connecticut school district has to complete a safe return to in-person instruction and continuity of services plan. Part of this plan required that we seek feedback from the public. I think I expressed to this group once already that we had sent out a survey to families asking for considerations and thoughts for the reopening of next year. As a gentleman before spoke, as you can imagine, the two biggest topics, masks and full days of instruction. Not surprisingly, the large majority of respondents, want 5 full days of in-person instruction and students to no longer wear masks. This has frustrated myself, not not that didn't frustrate myself. What frustrates myself is this plan, because while we're receiving this feedback from the community, the Safe Return Plan includes the implementation of mitigation strategies. And if you read through here a little bit, it says in order to be eligible for federal aid, this plan must be submitted to the Grant Administration Program and be available on the district's website by June 23rd. So that's 9 days from today. So the one thing I do believe is, like last year's reopening plan, this plan will evolve as the summer progresses. But right now, federal aid is contingent upon responding to each of the mitigation measures. So you'll see that in many areas as you go through it. It talks about, a lot of the mitigation measures, such as mask wearing and distancing. And we've tried to leave ourselves as kind of generic as possible by saying, we'll continue to follow CDC or Connecticut Department of Public Health guidance, seek to have those conversations with those organizations. I'm on every Tuesday morning with the Department of Public Health, and keep giving them the same feedback that we're getting here. I have to imagine that this feedback is beginning to get to the governor. So like I said, I'm hopeful that the guidance will continue to change as conditions improve. One thing I think that is in our control, and barring any unforeseen circumstances, we're going to be in school full time next year. I know that's something parents clearly want, families want, the teachers want, so we want to get them back. So this is a template that the state kind of gave us. We have to take this and make it kind of a easily readable document on our website by June 23rd. Like I said, I imagine this will change. I mean, as of right now, there's an executive order that we talked about before on masks in school buildings, during the school day. So, if anyone has any questions on this or anything else on reopening, I mean, it's very early right now.
We just closed, right? I mean,
I know.
We just finished one, right?
I know.
So if the governor, gives it to this town level is it a Board of Ed decision? Is it your decision? Like, it's something we vote on?
It's not going to be on the Board of Ed level. It's going to be on the state level.
You think?
Yeah, they're not.
You don't think they'll just say push it off?
No, because remember, money is tied to this. The federal money is tied to it, and federal money says you must comply with the state guidelines. So it's not going to be it's not going to be a local level decision. It's going to be whatever the state says the guidelines are.
So if the state says we have to wear masks
because we're
getting money, we have to follow.
Unless you want to give up $1.8 million in funding.
But they did leave like the whole remote school and everything like that up to just the superintendent.
That they did.
Yeah.
So since they did that, could they do masks up?
They could, right?
Again, I would say that is highly doubtful.
You do?
There's some things that are going to be like Joe has already announced, there is no more remote learning. Everybody is in school.
But we don't know about snow days yet, right?
We do not know about snow days, but again, that's on the state level. We can't say, we're going to have our snow days be remote days, and then because it's the state that has to approve to say those will count, because you can do that, but if they don't count, the kids are going to have to go back to school. There's certain things
that the state could come back and say, yes, you can. If you as a district would like to use remote learning as a snow day, it could come down to a town level. Like they could, if you choose to take that option or not.
Well, they would have to say, the state would have to say,
give approval.
Remote snow days count towards your 180
but that's what I'm
days.
saying. And then we as a board could decide to adopt it or not.
Right, or we could do some stuff that we did this year. We said we'll give 3 traditional snow days, and anything over the 3 traditional snow days.
But that's what I'm asking for masks. Just saying, if it came down to that level, is it then the Board of Ed decision? Is it the superintendent's decision?
They leave it up to the district.
Yeah, I would be up to the board, but that would be, I would say that 99.9% will be, it's the state. Because again, this is going to be guided by executive order, which is still in place by the governor.
But
the
when
CDC,
does that expire?
July 20th.
Right?
July 20th.
Yeah. So who knows?
Who knows? It may come down to that, the governor says, I'm not going to enforce. But again, remember, you have elementary school kids, and as they are not getting sick by it, none of them are going to be vaccinated by September.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
the last year when this all happened in March and we started getting that flurry of executive orders, it was up at that time. I believe there was an executive order that said the masks are up to the superintendent, because there was a whole thing about, well, do boards need to vote on?
But I think that was in the early stages, and then when they finally said, listen, everybody has to wear a mask, that was the end of that.
But from the state level.
From the state level.
So going forward, because now there's money tied to it, it's probably going to come from.
Right.
Well, I'm just trying to address Christine's point about, I think if there's an emergency situation, it depends. Yeah, it depends.
Again, we can speculate all we want. We're in a holding pattern.
No, I know,
and
until
it's
we see what happens.
And it's going to be up to the state to tell us, and they may not tell us until August.
We sit here representing the State Board of Ed.
Right.
We are charged by the State Board of Ed. If the State Board of Ed says your meetings will be on Tuesday nights, then I think we'd have to meet on Tuesday. I mean, I know it sounds foolish, but they regulate what we do.
Right. And they say it's 180 days and snow days can't be remote. It's 180 days and snow days can't be remote. We do not have any flexibility in those things.
They put in a universal calendar. We had to follow it. Right or wrong.
I'm just curious where this is all going to play out, because it's,
We're
you're going to have a mix of vaccinated versus non-vaccinated kids,
and then that gets even uglier. I think you kind of need to make, and this is just me, I think you kind of need to make a universal decision as to yes or no, because I think if you say if you're vaccinated, you don't have to wear masks, but if you don't, you do, I think that's going to turn into an ugly sort of debate.
I agree. I'm just curious, how it will be interesting.
It'll be interesting, but my guess is that based on even last year what happened with the whole COVID thing, they really did not tell us until last minute.
Oh, definitely. They're not going to want, come on. Nobody's going to want that firestorm.
Wait, I mean, I know up till a week ago, you hadn't even gotten the guidance for summer school yet, right?
Yep.
And have you gotten it yet?
You guys have it now, right? Yeah.
But you just got it.
Yeah.
They only just got guidance for summer school.
Yeah.
So
Do the kids have to wear masks in the school?
Right now in school buildings until July 20th.
Till July 20th.
Which is interesting because summer school ends July 28th.
Right.
And then do they flat out say after July 20th if they don't have to?
Well,
No,
if
it's up
the
to
orders
the state.
expire and nothing happens, then.
Or they'll just extend the orders
Or
like
they'll
they've been
extend the orders.
extended
It's
twice.
only one or the other. If they don't extend it, then no, you don't have to follow it.
It's all going to depend on what the
Right.
state does, and I think it's too early to say at this. We're in a situation. Listen, we can't make the decision on
No,
the
I
board
know.
level, so
No.
we are in a holding pattern,
I'm
waiting
just
until the
curious,
state.
if it came down to it, how do we approach it?
The
Is
state
it-
can make the decision and say, this is what you got to do, or, this is
Right, I'm
this is
saying
the
if the-
mandate. Or they could come back to us and say, it's up to you guys.
Right, and
You
that's
can
what I'm
decide this or that.
asking. I get it if the state mandates it, yes, we have to follow what the state is. What I'm saying is if the state decides to say, you know what, we're gonna put on a local level. Some towns have 85% vaccination rates and they may feel comfortable versus others, or whatever the situation is. I'm just curious, how does that work for us then,
Again,
as a
that's going to
board?
they're going to be guiding that, because if the governor doesn't do anything, I will bet my last dollar that the State Department of Education comes out and tells us what we are going to do. So even the governor doesn't say it, the State
And the State
Department
Board of Ed will come out.
they will come out and tell you.
They're not
So
gonna
it's
have a
never
choice.
going to be on the local level, because bearing the governor not doing it, they will do it.
Gotcha.
So you'll get a letter from the commissioner,
One way or another.
one way or the other, telling us what we will be doing. It's never going to come down to us.
Oh, it's not, no, they're not
Never.
going to leave that.
No, never. All right, anybody else, discussion else on that? All right, Joe, you are still up.
Just really quickly, and I apologize because I know I've asked this before, and people, I want to get the three, with 3 collective bargaining unit contracts to do. I'd like to get them done over the summer. Paras, nurses, and librarians. And I think I had asked before, and if anyone had volunteered to be a liaison for that. Can you just remind me, which one did you want to be on, Nick? Did you?
Surprise
Okay.
me.
Anyone have a preference on
What were the 3 again, Paras?
paras, nurses, and librarians?
I'd like to do nurses.
Nurses? Okay.
Yes.
When are they doing?
That's once I find out, then I'll work with people to get their, I'd like to get them in July if we can. Librarians?
You need 3 on each, Joe?
No,
Are you the only
Just
one that
one,
got that?
I think
just
just
one for
one.
these.
Were you the only one that got that?
I
Why I
don't
whispered?
remember. It might be a brain freeze. I don't know. I don't remember.
Anyone want to do Paris?
What does it entail time-wise? How much more?
Depends on how long it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully 2 or 3 meetings. And then there's some work that we could do, outside. It's definitely not as long as the teachers one. That's a lot. I would say
Administrators was 35 minutes.
That was nice.
That was 35 minutes, one meeting.
I mean, Shannon, honestly, Joe, is it okay if I answer, because I sat on it last, can I?
Oh, Paris?
Yeah.
Good, yeah.
Yeah, so Shannon, it was 3 meetings, and then the 4th one, we showed up, but it was already set, if that makes sense. I don't know if that made any, but.
Does anybody else want to do Paris?
I've done that before.
So, I just did, I just
Yeah,
sat.
I did it the last 2 times before that. Shannon?
What? Okay.
All right, you got
I'll
Shannon.
try to make it as painless. I'll try to make it as painless as possible.
It's a good
Another
leverage.
short straw.
It's good leverage to
Yes,
the Paris. Listen, Shannon's got TikTok. We gotta get this going.
Just bring bagels and stuff. Seriously, no joke.
Thank you.
All right, great. Now we will move on to old business. First up, we have policies for our second review, vote anticipated. The first one is 5145.5 and 4000, which is Title IX. Number 2 is 5111, admissions, placement, and those are including 3 different forms. One of acknowledgement to exempt attendance, 5 and 6-year-olds, acknowledgement to exempt attendance 17-year-olds, and declaration of legal residency. 3324, which is WMNR reimbursements, and that's pretty much just to eliminate that since that doesn't exist anymore in our world. And 1250, which is visits to the school. Do I have a motion to approve these as presented? Thank you, Jerry. Do I have a second? Thank you, Nick. Any discussion on any of these?
Just gotta make one point, right? We added a revised line to the Title IX policy.
That's correct.
Okay. So that line is in the reporting procedures and formal complaint, and it basically says that filing a Title IX complaint does not preclude an employee or student family from filing a complaint with any other appropriate agency, and it lists them. So that was just a revision that we made after the first review.
Okay. Thank you.
So that would be in the policy once approved.
Yeah. Any other discussion on those? All right, hearing none. All in favor? Great, thank you. All right, we will move on to new business, item A, and we've already touched on this a little previously when we were talking about the budget for this year, which is the discussion and possible action on furlough days memorandum of understanding. Since we've talked about it, Joe, is there anything more to add on this?
I don't think there's anything more to add. I wasn't sure if you wanted to make a motion to, something to the effect of motion to execute the furlough day memorandums of understanding with each group or something along those lines. We have the memorandums of understanding, we have the surplus, but might be nice to.
Okay, great. So do I have a motion to execute the budget surplus by executing the memorandums of understanding to give back furlough days to all our bargaining units based on discussions Joe has as to which employees in those bargaining units wish to get their furlough days returned to them? Thank you, Jerry. Do I have a second? Thank you. Let's go, Christine. Any further discussion on this? Dave?
I think just the point needs to be made, though, that the points in the MOUs have been met, right? We receive certain funds, we have a surplus as a result, and we're
Following
good.
the,
We're
we're
good.
following
We
the
need to-
language appropriately?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
my understanding of it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Jerry?
I'd like to say kudos to all of us. I mean, honestly, you know, you're right. You know, there was a little letter of understanding, you know, was followed, but I'd just like to say thank you. I mean, to all of us. It was a lot of work for all of us. It worked out. Thank God, and I'm happy it did.
Yep.
We wanted it all along.
Yes.
You know, so
Absolutely.
Very
and
true.
I think it shows.
Yep. Nobody wanted to do it, it's just that we needed to wait until this point in time to really be
Right.
solid in our numbers to say, yes, we have the money and we can give back. Earlier in the year, we just didn't have
No.
that clarity at
Right.
that point.
We have to keep our promises.
Yes,
If
absolutely.
we want credibility in future discussions
Mm-hmm.
and anything, and in give-backs, and thank you to all the unions
That stepped up.
that did this, we have to have credibility, we honor our agreements,
Mhm.
that's it.
Exactly,
Mm-hmm.
100%.
Yep. Any further discussion? All in favor then? Great, thank you, motion passes. We have already covered item B and we've covered item C, so we are going to move on to item D, which is a number of votes anticipated on our food service program. And these are most of our stuff that we have to do and approve every year. Joe, do you want to talk about a couple of them first? Then we can go in there?
Yeah, do you want me to do that? Do you want me to talk about
Yeah.
each of them instead of doing them separately? So the first one is you're voting on the cents per meal revision for the current year. It went from 32 cents to about 15 cents for the management fees and 22 cents for the administrative fees, with a cap of 38,260 and 54,225. It looks like we'll hit those caps because we did really well. We did a lot of meals this year. The second one is the renewal with Sodexo for the 6 year of operation. You had previously voted to extend the contract. This is just approving the contract, and then you'll sign that, Donna. The next one is the contract for next year.
For the same
It's the
thing with that.
same thing, but it's just Massac, yeah. Same as NSLP.
That's two
just
different
Massac.
contracts.
Yep. The fourth one just authorizes Jack and I to be the signers for the food service contract once you approve it and authorize us. And then the last one is the one we vote on every year on the healthy food certifications. Normally we vote no on the healthy food certifications to keep Massac off program. So you need to vote no. So if you look at this one, I'm assuming you guys want to, if you want to keep them off, you're going to vote no for it. So the motion is going to read, whenever we get to it, it'll start with pursuant to CGS, and it has to be read in this way. So I apologize for the long motion, but that came directly from the state.
Right, this is to opt out, not of the federal one,
Yep,
just the state
state.
one, so that because it's an all or nothing.
exactly.
It's either the whole district is on it or the whole district is off of it. You can't have a hybrid where your elementary and middle schools are on the Connecticut program and the high school is off. It has to be an all or nothing, so we're an all off, so that Massac does not have to be on it.
That's correct.
For the state.
For the state, not federal,
yep.
not the National School Lunch Program,
Yep.
this is the state.
The other four schools are still in the National Lunch Program. But the fact that Massac's off program makes us, that's a no for us. And then we don't have to worry about letter B there because we're going to be off the program. We would move to letter C. There's a draft motion there just to vote for the ability to be able to sell beverages that may not meet the healthy food certifications at other times during the day.
And that'd be a yes vote.
And that would be a yes vote.
Yeah. All right. So let's go back up to the top and start. Do I have a motion to approve the revised COVID amendment Nslp Monroe Schools with Sodexo for the 2020-21 price per meal for the 5th year of operations, and this is what we did this year. Just so everybody understands that they changed the costs so that the food structure, so that we did not have a huge deficit and stuff. Do I have more? Thank you, Nick. Do I have a second, Jerry? Any discussion on this one? All right.
How did we end with that? What's the latest?
We're still waiting for final numbers. Ron was saying it looks like one will be a surplus, but one will be a deficit, but you can't move money from
Right, it
account.
can't wash out.
They can't wash
Right.
out, but they are a wash. So, but we have plenty of funds to be able to cover that small deficit. that
So
we have.
remind us again at the height, how much it was? What was it?
300 and something?
Oh, it's 300 something. Oh, cool.
Yeah.
350 or something like that?
Yeah, we were looking at it.
Wow,
Yeah.
nice.
It's
Yeah.
gonna be, it's not,
Scary
they're still working on the final
Thank you, all the
numbers,
kids
he
and
said.
parents.
Yeah.
I have a big question on this. Does this renewal, maybe it doesn't apply to number one, but renewing it, are we still under operating on the same procedure that we could be in the same position next year if we don't sell enough lunches?
I think this is assuming we're going back
I
to,
understand, but
that we'd have to negotiate.
Yeah, I'm back to-
That would be separate. This is assuming not for one, but for 2 and 3, that everything is back to normal and you're back in full time, which we know we are going to be back in full time. And if something happens, then we would
We're out
have to
for-
negotiate
yeah,
that
yeah, we
with
have to.
Sodexo. That would not be covered in this.
Have to call in Alan again.
We're pretty good partners to that extent this year.
Yeah. But at this point, there is no remote and everybody's in full time. All right. Any other discussion on number 1 we're talking about? All right, hearing none, all in favor? Thank you, motion passes. We will move on to number 2, which is a motion to approve the renewal of the Sodexo for the 21-22 Nslp Monroe schools for the 6th year of operation. This will be the final year of this. This will have to go out to RFP. There is no renewing after this. Do I have a motion to approve that? And we've already done this previously. This is just approving the
We did it
contract.
recently, right?
Mhm.
And when we go out to RFPs, nobody else bids anyways,
Mm.
so.
Well, again, that's gonna.
Well, not your problem.
Exactly. That is not my problem. That's not your all's problem. All right, do I have a motion to approve this? Thank you, Jerry. Do I have a second? Thank you, Christine. Any discussion on this one? And this is for the elementary and middle school for the National School Lunch Program.
Yeah, just to be consistent with my vote on the last contract, I'll be voting against 2 and 3.
All right, thank you. Anybody else? Hearing none, all in favor? Thank you, motion passes. Sorry. Sorry, motion against. I apologize. So that's.
This
so-
is against renewing stuff?
Okay, that's a problem, because we've already renewed the program.
What just happened?
We just did not approve that, and that becomes a problem, because now we have no school lunches for
Yeah, no, there's no school
September.
lunch, so what happened?
Did everyone understand this correctly? Let's.
I don't think, I don't know,
This-
but right now we have,
This is the federal.
No, this is just the contract that we previously approved for Sodexo. This is we've already renewed it. This is just to approve that renewal.
Jerry,
The
get your apron
contract.
on. Get your apron on in the kitchen. You're
So
going to be cooking.
by
a lot.
not
I voted
approving
yes.
it, so by not approving it, understand we have no lunch program
understood what you
starting
meant.
in September.
Wait,
So
who-
no lunch program. There is no
No,
food
no,
being served in our
no,
schools.
no,
And it's
no.
not going out to bid between now and September, so.
That cannot
Yeah,
happen. You're done. You have no lunch.
No, Donna said yes,
Oh, you
that's
did
4.
say
Yeah.
Oh, we had 4 versus.
Yeah.
So give me Robert's Rule of Order now, explain.
Robert's Rule of Order is that the only people who can bring that up again, I think, is the people who are in the affirmative to ask for a revote,
The
which
people-
would not be the 4 people.
The people the people voting the negative can
Correct.
move to reconsider the vote.
That's it.
Okay.
I move to reconsider the vote.
Do I have a second on that? Thank you, Alan. All right, so I will, Dawn, my thing just, okay.
Poor Joe.
I don't know what to do. Are we bringing McDonald's and everything? Because there's no food being
Do
served.
you guys on purpose not want to renew Sodexo? You no vote, like no votes? Did you mean to vote no?
I voted no with Nick the last time.
Same
we
as
did
Miss.
this.
Same.
Yeah, I thought it was gonna be just 6-3, like, not 6-3 politically, 6-3 like we did last time, just to be, I'm just being consistent with what I did last time.
I think we reconsider the vote because there's misunderstanding on all these different points.
Right.
And where we're going.
Okay, this is so we're voting to renew.
We already voted to renew, we already voted to extend the contract previously. This is just to vote the actual contract.
This is to approve the contract.
Yeah.
The language of the contract.
Correct.
We've already approved giving them
A renewal.
A renewal.
Yes.
This is to approve the wording of that contract.
Okay.
That's it.
Correct.
A little bit of a.
And understand, I'll say this.
Which is also not our wording, right? It's more the federal government.
This is comes directly from the USDA.
Right.
This is not our, we have
Right.
no control over this language.
Correct.
So understand, we vote no. I'm just going to rephrase
No
it.
other company wants to do the
We,
hot lunch.
it doesn't matter that we have no food for lunch for any of our kids.
Yeah, you'd never be able to get them in between now and September.
No.
It just,
Right. We've approved giving
already
Sodexo
approved
a
it.
renewal,
Right.
and we voted against that renewal, but the
We don't
renewal
even
was
have to stay
approved.
consistent with that because now
This
that's already
is-
a done deal, so.
This
But
is
it's
just
the
voting
language
on
of
the
the
contract.
This is the language of the
Yeah.
All it
contract.
is.
Right.
Does it mean you agree?
Should move forward.
Right,
Correct.
right, so
Right.
like.
Or there's going to be no food come September in our schools.
Okay, then let's revote.
Yeah, let's just revote.
Exactly.
All right.
Do over.
Well,
So-
we have to vote on.
I have to
that
have a
motion.
new motion because that
I
motion.
made the motion.
Yes.
And I second it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So all in favor of the language of the renewal of the contract? Thank you.
There you go.
All against?
Perfect.
Thank you. Motion passes.
All right, Joe. You're good.
We'll have food, Joe.
you all right, Joe?
I don't have a heart attack yet.
Communication.
I can't even imagine how you would put that out in the communication.
Yeah, that would be the message. Good luck.
Pack your lunches, parents. And when you're not having to deal with it.
Let's make sure we clearly understand all of these as we move forward.
The third item, which is the contract with Sodexo for the high school, is the same thing. We've already renewed it. This is just the contract itself. Motion to approve the contract with Sodexo for the 21-22 Massac High School 6th year. Do I have a motion to approve that? Thank you, Shannon. Second, Christine. Let me just say, some Massac kids are very large, and you probably do not want to vote this down and tell them there's no food at the high school level. I'm just putting that out there.
This is the language of the contract.
This is the language of the contract. We've already
like the other
renewed
one.
the we already voted to renew, well, not to renew, but to add,
Right? Extend 1 year.
extend the 1
Extend 1
year.
year.
This is just the language terms of the contract only. All right, any discussion on this? All right, hearing none, all in favor?
There's no difference between the two.
All against? He just wants his kids to eat.
Yeah.
He's
I
afraid
know,
of his kids.
your kids are in high school now. Poor little the poor little kindergartners wouldn't get any.
I'll vote for the language. I didn't vote for the company, I voted for the language.
Before that was the same thing. Oh my God.
Motion passes.
What is happening tonight?
I don't
We have to
know.
make sure it passes.
I need to go.
He doesn't want to go home and tell his son he can't eat
Yeah.
that shit at the high
Exactly.
school.
You know what my groceries bills would be?
That was exciting.
Oh my gosh. All right, so the next one is just a
Shall we have
motion.
hot lunch?
I'm just anticipating having to have, what do you call it, like a Grubhub or.
Dave Rodriguez from Bella Rosa. We just get Dave Rodriguez, Bella Rosa. He'll cook in the kitchen, no problem.
Remember Classifieds at Ridgemont High?
Yes.
They had the pizza delivered, that would be.
We'll just have Monroe restaurants cater.
We can get food trucks for outside Massac, right?
Exactly.
Well, we
There's
did.
probably some
That
zoning
once,
reg.
yeah.
Planning and
Oh my
zoning
God.
would go berserk.
All right, the next item is the motion to approve The authorized signatures change form showing the superintendent, Joe Cobza, and assistant superintendent, Jack Ciccolini, as the authorized signatures. This is just them
Just
being
allowing them to
authorized
sign.
signatures. Nick,
I'll make the motion.
thank you. Second, Jack. Any discussion on this? All right, all in favor? Thank you, motion
All
passes.
right, Joe, you're good.
Science stuff.
So far.
The next one is voting all Monroe Public Schools off the healthy food certification for the state of Connecticut. Again, this is a
We vote
all
yes
in,
for this one.
all
No.
in,
No,
all
no,
out,
no,
and we're
no,
voting.
No, and it's not
The
healthy.
motion is that we're
It's not
not,
That's what I'm saying. So we're voting yes, like not voting yes, but voting.
It down.
right. So the
Yes.
motion to vote no
There it
to
is.
pursuant to Connecticut General Statutes, Section 10-215F, the Board of Education or governing authority certifies that all food items offered for sale to students in the schools under its jurisdiction and not exempted from the Connecticut nutrition standards published by the Connecticut State Department of Education will comply with the Connecticut nutrition standards during the period of July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2022. The certification shall include all foods offered for sale to students separately from reimbursable meals at all times and from all sources, including but not limited to school stores, vending machines, school cafeterias, culinary programs, and any fundraising activities on school premises sponsored by the school or non-school organizations and groups. And again, this is a motion to vote no to this.
So we actually, I'll make that motion to vote no. And then we actually all raise our hands.
Correct.
Because we're voting it
No.
down.
We're voting
Exactly.
yes that we're taking the schools off the Connecticut Healthy Food
We're
Certification.
voting yes to vote no.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes, exactly.
Correct.
Yeah.
Do I have a second for this? Thank you, Jeff. Any discussion further on that? So a yes vote is to take the schools off the Healthy Food Certification. All in favor? Thank you, motion passes. We will skip item B because we voted no. And then we are voting next on this one for the separate sales of beverages. Because there are schools where there's beverages are separate, like at the high school, correct? Where they're not part of the package. So, motion to vote yes to the Board of Education or governing authority to allow the sale to students of beverages not listed in section 10-221Q of the Connecticut General Statutes, provided that the following conditions are met. The sale is in connection with an event occurring at the end of the regular school day or on the weekend. The sale is in the location of the event. The beverages are not sold from a vending machine or school store. An event is an occurrence that involves more than just a regularly scheduled practice, meeting, or extracurricular activity. The school day is the period from midnight before to 30 minutes after the end of the official school day. Location means where the event is being held must be in the same place as the beverage sales. So I'll give an example of this. Music and Meatballs held at the cafeteria. They do serve soda. You could not do that without saying that you're authorizing that event to have beverages that are not included in the Connecticut state, Connecticut General Statutes on this particular one. So those are the type of events.
Gatorade at concession stands and things like
Right,
that.
those types of things. Football game, you couldn't sell soda, Gatorade, the whole deal. That's what this is. Do I have a motion to approve?
I
Thank you,
move to
Nick.
vote
Do I have a
yes.
second? Thank you, Jack. Any discussion on this? All right, all in favor? Thank you, motion passes. All right, we have got through those, thank goodness. We will move on to the approval of the 21-22 rates and fee schedules, tuition fees, and facility use fees. This is what we have to do every year, and approve our fees that are in place. This includes our lunch fees, and this also includes, library things, parking fees, all that great stuff. And also obviously our surcharges.
I quick question. The substitute teacher, the perm sub teachers, and the substitute nurses, those are all the rate, well, the sub nurses per hour and the two others are per day rates that
Yes,
were paid out?
Correct.
Do we have any knowledge of that? Where do we fall on that? Is that typical? Have there been increases to those numbers?
That is an increase. At one point, we were very low, like $75 a day.
They went up a few years ago. They're pretty
Yeah.
competitive in this area,
Yeah.
although it's interesting. There's some towns around the state, not as much around here though, which I was surprised about. I mean, we're $95 for the call-in daily subs, and our permanent subs, the ones that come in every day, make $105.
Right.
I think that's pretty close to our adjoining neighbors right now. We did bump that up a couple of years ago in the budget process.
Yeah, but competitive to Lower Fairfield County, no.
Well, I think perhaps in the upcoming budget cycle, if that's something we could look at and compare to other people and see if we're in line. That's all. Thank you.
All right, do I have a motion to approve what I just said, the rates and fee schedules, the rates, fee schedules, tuition fees, facility use fees as presented? Thank you, Christine. Second, Nick. Any discussion?
Just quick question, Joe. With next year, are we going back to allowing outside agencies to rent our facilities again if all goes well?
Absolutely.
Okay, because
Absolutely.
I know Monroe kids and organizations have been going to outside
Yeah.
outside of Monroe for curricular activity. It would be nice to have them here again and getting that revenue
Absolutely.
again. So
I agree.
Yeah. All right, any other discussion? All right, hearing none, all in favor? All right, thank you. We will move on to Christine.
Hurry up, Christine.
We will move on to item F, discussion and possible action on the creation of a policy for transgender students. This was asked by board member Nick Kapoor to be added to the agenda. This language was from our attorney, Steve Sedor, on how we need to present this on our agenda. So Nick, since this was your ask, I'm going to let you take it away.
Thank you. I have my second speech of the evening, and I will end with a motion that I would like us to consider. There are dates that we all remember in our lives, and a date that I remember most fondly is October 21st, 2011. It was 6 days before my 21st birthday and 18 days before I would lose my first election. We unfortunately live in a world where coming out is something that many people must still go through. But it was time on October 21st, 2011 to tell my parents those fateful words that so many members of the LGBTQ+ community have to tell their parents at one time or another. I'm gay. I could tell you exactly what I did that day. I could tell you what clothes my parents were wearing, and pretty much verbatim the 10-minute conversation we had after the big moment. I have two supportive and loving parents who accept me for who I am, but that's not the case for everyone. I'd like to talk about some of the statistics around this issue. In a 2013 Pew Research study, 68% of LGBTQ+ people surveyed said they felt different about their sexual orientation or gender identity at or younger than age 14. That's a high school freshman or younger. The National Center for Transgender Equality found that 75% of transgender youth feel unsafe at school, and those who are able to persevere had significantly lower GPAs, were more likely to miss school out of concern for their safety, and were less likely to plan on continuing their education. The CDC found almost 2% of high school students are transgender, and of those 2%, 27% feel unsafe at or going to and from school, 35% are bullied at school, and 35% have attempted suicide. That 2% number is probably higher as there is still a stigma in being transgender, and people are answering that question truthfully. We've seen the proportion of LGBTQ+ individuals continue to increase census after census because it's becoming a bit more accepting. Nearly 10% of high school students do not identify with the male-female binary. The Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network, a leading organization on education policy in the LGBTQ+ arena, found in their 2019 Connecticut snapshot that 91% of Connecticut public school students heard the word gay used in a negative way, and 68% of students heard negative remarks about transgender people. This same report found 53% of Connecticut public school students who identified as LGBTQ+ were verbally harassed because of their gender expression. 15% were physically harassed because of their gender expression, and 5% were physically assaulted because of their gender expression in schools. Also in Connecticut, 2 in 5 transgender students were unable to use the school bathroom aligned with their gender, and 1 in 3 were prevented from using their chosen name or pronouns in school. Do we need a transgender and gender non-conforming youth policy right now? Yes, absolutely. Why? Because we have students in the Monroe public school system who are transgender. We have students in the Monroe public school system who identify as non-binary. Now you might ask, how do I know this? I know this because I know them personally. These students are here now. Would we be one of the first districts in our region to do this? Yes, we would. But why shouldn't we be trailblazers on this issue? I don't believe that we need to wait and see on this policy. There is litigation, there are laws passed by the General Assembly and by the Congress, and there are other directives that come from various departments at the state and federal levels that force us to adjust our local Board of Education policies all the time. If anything should happen where a court decision would affect what we have written on our policy, then we could adjust it, just as we did with the Title IX policy earlier tonight. Moreover, and most importantly, I believe, the Connecticut State Department of Education encourages boards of education to make policy around these issues. Quote, while school boards as a general rule have protective anti-discrimination policies to advance the safety and well-being of the student population, school districts are faced with more difficult conversations about how to implement these policies on a day-to-day basis. How do schools allow equal access but respect privacy for transgender and other students? How does a school district apply its dress code for transgender students? And how do schools regulate student use of single-sex restrooms and locker rooms? School boards and school staff must answer these increasingly common questions through policy and daily on-the-ground decisions, end quote. Why a policy? Why can't we just let the state or federal government tell us what to do? Well, we are a self-governing body. We, the Board of Education, legislate policy for our school district. No one, and with all due respect to him, not even the superintendent, has the authority to change, delete, or add policy, only us. We need to support our students with a transgender policy to show them that their Board of Education has their back. And to say that this policy won't help a lot of students, I believe, is an invalid argument. If any policy that we pass could help even one student, or if any policy could even make one student feel supported, then it is 100% worth it. It is crazy to me to think that it was only 6 years ago this month that same-sex marriage was legalized across our country. Our graduating seniors were in 7th grade only when that decision came down from the Supreme Court. And 10 to 15 years from now, even the fact that we're having this conversation will hopefully seem like it's a given. I really truly hope that that's the future that we're headed towards. But until we get there, we must continue to make progress towards true equality for all. I'd like you all to imagine for a moment looking in the mirror and not seeing yourself as the person that you actually believe that you are. It is completely disorienting. The mental and physical anguish that transgender youth go through is unimaginable. And if they are not able to be out and be who they are, their feelings must be suppressed, and being able to not freely express themselves is bottled up and causes many of the statistics that I cited earlier. Imagine for a moment if you were a transgender educator and you were looking for a job in a school district. Would you look for a district that accepts you? Would you look up to see if they had a policy supporting transgender students? You probably would. I'd like you now to imagine your own child telling you that they're gay, lesbian, bisexual, queer, or transgender, and what that would mean to you. Would you want your child's school district to explicitly state that they support your child? I know that I would. I could keep you here for a very long time tonight telling you about the mental anguish that a 16-year-old high school student in 2006 was going through trying to find himself. Realizing that he was different, but knew that being anything other than cisgender and straight was unacceptable in 2006 America, even in most parts of Connecticut. I could tell you about the 5 years of my life, from 16 to 21 years old, where I had to suppress who I was because of fear for my physical safety. But instead, I would like us to move forward. I would like us all to make a positive contribution to the discussion and to start the process of creating this needed policy. When I started running for local office a decade ago, I promised to use any platform that I might have in the future for good and positive change for all, but especially for those who can't or won't speak for themselves. And so to that end, and in accordance with what our attorney sent to us in our email, I would like to make a motion, and I would move that the Board of Education instruct the Policy Committee to create a transgender and gender nonconforming youth policy for the full board's review. Thank you.
Thank you. I need a second. Thank you, Jerry. I will open discussion, and since this policy, so just to let you know, this policy has come well, the discussion of a policy has become before the policy committee previously, so I'll let George, as the chair of the policy committee, start, if you'd like, discussion as to what has transpired to this point with regard to this.
That's true. The subject has come before the policy committee. It first came up as an item during the March 2021 agenda. We couldn't get to it during that meeting and give it the discussion that it deserved, so we deferred it to our next meeting, which was in May. Sorry. So we discussed it as an agenda item on our May meeting of the policy committee. We talked about how we currently have several existing board policies that relate to this subject and that cover this subject, and that there is no basis in legislation right now at the state level for crafting an additional policy on this subject at this time. So, we then had unanimous consensus among the committee members to table this topic until such time that legal developments at the state level warrant the committee doing so. So, we tabled it.
All right, thank you. I just wanted everybody to have the background, because not everybody's on the policy committee and knows what has transpired up until this point. So as Nick alluded to, because in my 12 years, this has not come up where a board member has requested a specific policy or this to come forth, I had asked Joe to have Steve Cedar, our town attorney, not only tell us how the item needed to be listed on our board agenda, but also offer his opinion as to this, because originally it was going to be a resolution, which now Nick has altered and changed. So I'm going to ask Shannon to, as the secretary, could you just read Steve's opinion on it? Not the item placement, just the opinion.
What item placement?
Well, he gave two. There was a 1 and a 2. One was about how to place it, right? One was about
How to put it on the agenda.
One was about how
to put it on the agenda.
Yeah.
Well, no, just his opinion as to the whole policy thing, which is what, item 2? I'm sorry, I don't have it pulled up here.
It's 1 and 2. Do you want me to read 1 and 2?
Well, I think 1 only refers to,
Referring it to the policy committee.
So here,
I think 1 only refers to how, I guess read the whole thing. It's probably just easier than to try to dissect what we're reading.
okay.
Sorry, everybody.
This is the email from our board attorney, Steve Cedar. Greetings, you have asked for my opinion regarding the obligation of the Monroe Board of Education, the board, to place on the agenda for a full board vote the resolution prepared by a board member seeking to establish, 1, a standalone policy on transgender students, and 2, the means by which to assemble a team and create such a policy. After reviewing this resolution, I look at this as two different issues, and my opinion is as follows. The board is, among other things, a policy-creating entity. It has the authority and/or discretion to determine whether and what policies to create. Therefore, it would be appropriate for the board to have a discussion at a meeting to determine whether it wishes to have a standalone transgender policy. If it determines that it should have such a policy, then it would vote to do so. It would then refer to the policy committee the responsibility for creating a policy and submitting it to the full board for a vote on the policy. Number 2, it does not seem, however, that it would be appropriate for the board to have a vote on whether to specifically adopt or pass in full as written in the proposed resolution. The board currently has in place a process for creating and implementing policies of the board. Among other things, the policy committee is tasked with creating the policy and then, as noted above, submitting that policy to the full board for review. If board members wish to make comments on the policy that was created, it may do so and request revisions, additions to the policy. The resolution seeks to essentially set forth for the specific policy new requirements and procedures for creating this policy. It's very legalese, isn't it?
I just want everybody to be aware of what the whole process has come and what, which is why I'm asking that to be read.
Yeah.
All right, so, Jerry.
I'm not done yet.
I think she still has, have you still got stuff?
I'm
Yeah.
still going, yeah.
Oh,
For example, the assembly of a task force that do not appear to be part of the board's current procedure for adopting policies. Thus, although the topic of creating this policy may be appropriate for board discussion, the board should follow its own procedures for the creation of this policy if it decides that it wishes to create it. The board should follow its own procedures.
Right,
Okay,
Pretty key. And that's it.
that's it.
okay, thank you. Jerry, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I did, so I also sit on the committee, and I've thought about this a lot, and I think the more you have time to sit and read something and think about it, this is, for me, this is a gigantic step that I think we need to look at. Nowhere in here does it say that we have to adopt it. It just says, bring it to the policy, form a committee, a policy committee, and bring it to the committee. I got that. So looking at, I know you guys hate when I throw on the hat, but looking at my 35 years as a person in the classroom, this to me is near and dear. I mean, when I think about every child that's walked into my room, I never looked at the child as anything but a person in need for whatever reason. Never looked at the name, the color, sex, none of that mattered. What mattered is there was a situation, they were in my class, I had to teach them. There's a situation here that we all need to educate ourselves on, and we need to be careful with who we're touching. We're touching real people here. And I'd like to give this another shot. And, I think this is important enough that I don't know if I want to sit and wait for the state. Here we were talking about masks. And when is the governor's executive order going to expire? And we don't know if it... I don't want to wait for that. I want to sit here and have an intelligent conversation, which I think we can. And it's just my opinion. I'm one of 9. But I would like to give this another shot.
Thank you. Nick?
Thank you, Fight, just for the second time. I just want to make a few quick points as we continue the discussion. First, I forgot to thank the chair, of course, for putting this on the agenda. I was very focused on my speech, so thank you.
That's okay. That's perfectly fine.
Thank you, Donna, for putting it on the agenda. I very much appreciate it. The resolution that I sent out to everybody over the weekend, I just want to put a little background on where that came from. I understand that this topic has the potential to become a large conversation in our community. And the reason I wrote the resolution the way I did it is because I thought getting a community task force to workshop a policy before it came to the policy committee would have allowed the community to have a discussion on this. So I understand that our attorney, as Shannon read, disagreed with this, but he did say in his email that, and I'm going to quote, if it determines that it should have such a policy, then it would vote to do so. And so the motion that's pending on the floor was my motion that the board, the whole board, instruct the policy committee to create this for the full board's review. And so that's just to say that I believe that my motion is in order. And if I also may respectfully push back a little bit on that there's no need for an additional policy at this time. CABE has had a sample transgender policy in their library of policies since 2013. That policy has been the sample policy, the CABE sample policy, has been updated 5 times. They have a 7-page, this is CABE is they have a 7-page backgrounder on transgender students. This is in addition to, and I have all of these here for anybody who would like to read them, either before we vote on this motion or after. This is in addition to the 27 pages that the State Department of Education has put out on guidance on this issue. But I'd like to reiterate that guidance does not have the force of law. Our policies that we pass as a board have the force of law. And so we're having this discussion about masks and guidance and this and that, right? I mean, there's a difference between directive, guidance, and law. So I just want to make it clear why I did this the way I did it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Nick, can you do me one favor? And it's my own fault. I didn't write down the exact motion. Can you just read it to me again, the exact motion, so I have the exact motion?
I move that the Board of Education instruct the policy committee to create a transgender and gender nonconforming youth.
Wait, hold on,
Okay.
too fast. Okay, so I moved.
I move that the Board
of Education, hold on, instruct the policy committee to
create,
okay, thank you, a
transgender and gender nonconforming.
Wait, hold on. Okay, go ahead.
Youth policy for the full board's review.
Thank you. I just want to make sure I have it written down right. All right, thank you.
So if I can just jump on that a minute, Donna?
Sure.
We're not asking for a vote right now, or yes or no, to have a transgender policy. We're looking at a vote to just form a task force.
No. Well, not a task
force. I'm sorry, not a task.
We're looking at a resolution to send this to the policy
committee.
The committee to draft a transgender non-conforming policy.
So
to go to the whole board after it's drafted.
So what we're voting on is to instruct the policy committee to take this back. The policy committee would need to then
draft a policy for the full board.
Thank you. For the full board. This is not to vote on a policy because there is no policy.
Right.
It's to go to the policy committee because creating a task force, the Board of Education, as Steve Cedar says, and as we all know, has 3 basic jobs: hire and fire superintendent, create a budget, set policy. Nobody else outside that board sets policy. So that's why he said it in his, opinion that creating a task force is not the appropriate, way to go about this, because that's not the way the board of Education operates. They set their own policy, make their own policy. Any other discussion? David?
George, a question. So the policy committee, based on those things you went through, decided to table it and hold on for more information from the state, or a current lawsuit I think is going on?
No, for pending basis in law that would tell us we need to create a policy, because what we're talking about is CABE guidance, CABE suggested policies, CABE potential policies. CABE has thousands of policies out there. We don't adopt all of them, okay? And even the ones that we do adopt, sometimes we take the language verbatim, sometimes we parse it. Sometimes we write our own. Okay, so what we're talking about is we tabled it pending any litigation at any law at the state level that requires us to then go and create a policy that then conforms to that law.
What's the potential harm to us, or what's the potential, anything that could happen to us if we create a policy in regards to this, and then the state or CABE or whomever dictates something different?
Well, CABE would
Nothing,
never,
we
so
just
can I
change
just do
it.
point of information? CABE doesn't dictate anything. CABE has policies
Right.
out there, and what happens is, some of them are policies that the state, that they just have policies.
I'll reword it. I'll
Some-
reword my question.
Right, but some-
What's the potential liability to us if we put a policy in place that doesn't conform?
That doesn't conform to state law.
Mhm.
I would suggest that it opens it up to, beyond, the tension that might cause in the community and angst around that we could also look at potential legal issues.
Why don't we
And
just
attorneys
adjust
Wait,
it?
Alan had his hand up next.
Okay.
Why don't we just adjust it?
Yeah, that's all. We've never, yes. Yeah, I can't, wait a minute. We would never, we don't set policy that Jack doesn't check. First of all, I want to refute a few things. George, we did not vote to table it. And if we did, then I want to see in front of me where
I
we
got
took a
those
vote.
meeting minutes, actually.
We didn't,
We didn't vote.
sorry, did I say vote?
I thought you
No,
said
I
we...
No, he
said, I
said
said that
unanimously.
we had unanimous
Oh, good,
consensus.
okay.
Yeah.
I
So
and
what's
then,
yeah.
no, you're right, and then
Okay.
we don't approve it. When we do a policy, Jack always checks that policy out. He'll go to CABE, he'll do it. We don't just sit there and vote on a policy without some kind of legal opinion.
But that's what we're
Correct.
asking, that's
Right.
what we're asking us to do right now.
No,
No,
it's not.
no,
Okay,
it's,
you're asking us to form,
No.
to have the policy dictate to form, I mean, ultimately, that's what you're asking. Right? Like ultimately, like that's.
No, you're asking the
the-
policy committee to come up with something so that we could vote on it.
I'm not asking anybody to create a policy that doesn't conform to state or federal law. What I'm saying is that, and if I could just clarify my comment about CABE, the one nice thing about CABE, they do have thousands of policies, but what they do allow is you to not start from a blank page. And as we've done many times, we did it just tonight on Title IX. We added language that we felt was appropriate for us. And so the nice thing about a CABE policy is you don't have to start from a blank page. You could start from a blank page, but they have a sample transgender policy that has many things in it that I think we should consider. And then you adjust and you strike and you add. But anything that you do, anything that we add or strike or amend, we should send through our board attorney. I believe, my interpretation is that's part of his job as our attorney, to make sure things are, for lack of a better phrase, constitutional.
no, we've checked with our
or
attorney
that
in the
conform to
past.
state and federal law. So my motion is not to create anything that goes against anything that's pending. It's to create a policy for us on this particular issue, in accordance with everything that is out there.
So, let me reiterate. When we create a policy based on legislation so that our district can conform to that legislation. If we add, remove, amend, like Nick just said, the Title IX policy, it's because there are changes, and there's constant changes at the state level in the law that we then need to change the policy to amend, to abide by that, okay? So that's why we do that. We're not proactive in that regard. We are making sure that what we have on the books and how we're governing our district conforms to the law at the state level.
Gotcha.
Just want to be clear.
There are, this is really fun for me, by the way. I'm really loving the debate. There are things that we need to be proactive about. I just want to bring up a couple things that are in the sample policy from CABE, which, by the way, should this pass, we don't need to use. But, for example, official records in school districts. There is no state law about pronoun usage on official records. It's up to districts. Overnight field trip privacy and overnight field trip rooming based on gender. That's not in state law. That is something that I think that we should decide for our district because we are a self-governing district. Gender segregation in other areas of school buildings that we see fit. State law can never tell you, oh, at Massac High School, boys have to be here, girls have to be here, and those who don't identify as neither boys or girls need to go here. That's up to us as a self-governing body. Dress codes. Dress codes are up to local boards of education with other caveats. There's First Amendment implications in public school dress codes. Those are outside the bounds. There's other issues. And I can go, I mean, there's many other things here. Locker room accessibility, restroom accessibility. These are touchy subjects. But there is value, there is merit in being proactive about these things. We do not always have to be reactive on our policies. This is a place where we should be proactive.
Thank you. Alan?
It's that question for Nick. What did you say the suicide rate was?
35% of transgender high school students attempt suicide while in high school, according to the Centers for Disease Control.
I mean, if we could help a couple kids, you know, with a policy, why not? Why not do it?
David, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, sorry. So I just wanted to just come back to you, George, for a second. So in the past, when the policy committee said, okay, we're in compliance with Title IX, we have policies, we're just going to table it for now. At what point does the policy committee revisit an issue? Which is, I think, really, Nick, if I can summarize or paraphrase, he wants, well, no, he doesn't want us to just revisit it. He wants us to come up with policy.
To do it,
so
yeah.
to direct. So in the past, because what's concerning me here is the process. And full disclosure, I have personal interest in this issue. But what concerns me here is the process, because I don't want to set a precedent that if any one of us has a special interest, that we're making an exception for our group or our interest, whether it's safety, you know, as an example for me or whatever it is. So in the past, when the policy committee has said, hey, we're going to hold off on this, what's the impetus to get it going again minus the board saying, hey, do it? Or when has things been revisited? Law, legislative?
Yes, when it becomes necessary to conform to state law.
Okay. I'm not...
That's not true on all of our policies though, George. Some of them we just update because they need updating.
Well, correct, Jerry, but when we're making changes to stuff that's at the state law level, that's when we make the changes. That's when then we go and revisit it. So if we were to take the Title IX policy or the bullying policy or the policies that cover gender identity, expression, sex, sexual orientation, if we were to receive guidance at the state level, a state law change, we would then go into those policies and make sure that each of those policies reflect or up to date with the new legislation.
But we do have, wait, hold on, but we do have some policies that are just in-house policies that we have on a rotating schedule to look at that we may change or may not change.
Correct. We have a lot of policies out there that over the past several years we put on a rotating schedule, and we haven't gotten through all of them. Believe me, there's hundreds more out there for us to look at. But the ones that change at the state level, where there's a state law change, those always come in and take precedent over the rotating schedule of going through and updating all of the policies.
Gotcha. I understand. Okay. Nick?
Just in brief response to David, as the chair stated, you know, in her 12 years here, we haven't had an agenda item where a board member requested a policy be drafted. However, I just want to go back to our attorney's email. that says unequivocally that if the board determines that a policy should be created, then it should be created. So, call me proactive.
He said to follow the process, and I think he said this is circumventing that process.
No,
No.
the resolution of the task force, which is not,
was not the right process.
was not the right
Okay.
process.
So that's why Nick
Remember,
updated
this
his-
this is why I asked for everything to be read so everybody knows everything, everybody's in the same page. Originally, what Steve Cedar looked at was the resolution that Nick provided.
Okay.
And that was, in his opinion, was based on the task force of having this task force come together and write and create a policy. That, he said,
Right.
is not the correct process by
Right.
which. Nick's motion this evening has been updated to not be the resolution and creation of the task force. He has changed that that the board is instructing the policy committee to create a policy for the Board of Education. So that would then be covered under Steve's item that says the process should be that the policy committee creates a policy, and once they're satisfied with that policy, then it would come to the board for consideration and vote. So we've gone from, we've changed.
Okay.
Can we take like a 5-minute recess?
Personal recess?
Yeah, I just need to use the restroom, but if you guys want to continue, go ahead.
Well, if we're in recess,
Recess. Go.
Like 2 minutes, I'll be real
Yeah.
quick.
Can we
That's okay.
recess?
No
recess?
rush.
Yeah,
Yeah,
recess.
recess. Check your phones. Recess. Official recess. I'm gonna recess.
All right. And if anybody wants to go, feel free.
I think they want to see what's going to happen.
See ya. Other than the board members.
Perfect. I'm done. I'm going home. I'm tired.
All right. We are back in session. It's 10:14, and we will continue on where we left off. And I apologize. I don't remember who had their hands up and was talking. Thank you, Alan.
I didn't have my hand up. I wasn't talking, but I just.
I had concluded my.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
I just wanted to look up some current numbers and just really quick. Almost all transgender students have been verbally harassed, like called names and threatened, and that was at 87%. More than half of transgender students have been physically harassed, such as like pushed or shoved, 53%. 1/4 of transgender students have been physically assaulted, like punched, kicked, or injured with a weapon, 26%. And 1/3 of transgender students heard school staff make homophobic remarks, sexist remarks, and negative comments about someone's gender expression in the last year. And that was like in around 30%. It's a whole article. It just goes on to talk about the hostile climate that the students have to go through in school, and a lot of them miss school because they're afraid to come to school for safety reasons, and the negative impacts that the stress would have on their ability to perform in school.
And that's in general across the U.S., right?
Yes.
We also, just for the record to reflect, the board received emails over the weekend and today, 3 from people all of whom I know live in town, and also from a graduating senior who is transgender. All 4 of these emails spoke in favor at the time of passing the resolution, which we know now was not appropriate, but we did receive some communication on this.
Anybody else? David?
Then I think we do a very good job, and we all agree that all human beings need to be treated fairly and equally. Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, we don't have any current complaints or litigation against the district about this issue at all? Do we have any?
No, I know, Jack, you had pulled some of that data, but it was...
Yeah, as far as discipline data, although in the past 3 years Each in 2017-18 and 2018-19, there have been recorded incidents related to sexual or racial harassment. Can't identify, our data doesn't go drill down far enough to be able to say that that's related necessarily to transgender or a transgender issue. And then we did have survey data based on an EASC recommendation. Survey data was collected at Massac. That does support the information that Nick and Alan have already been sharing about wider data collected.
Right.
You would see similar. Responses.
A lot of
No
these
litigation.
kids don't report it, they're suffering in silence.
There's probably more than what's getting.
Right,
Yeah.
so just, so I know, when we had done the climate survey, and that's what you're referring to, right?
A climate survey, not the climate survey that's required by the state. This
Right,
is a survey that was done
So
based
which
on
is the
EASC.
climate survey, which is the climate survey that Ian Lowell took and then ran with it to create the new diversity at Massac Club? Because I will say they have been involved, and I can speak personally for this, as my child is one of, I will call, leaders in that club, and they've been working all year on different events and different things. So I know he took a climate survey, and I don't know which one, so clarify, and they created this club to address these items and stuff.
Based on the NEASC visit, they made a recommendation from the outcome of interviews with students about making the Massac climate more inclusive. Research was done. Harvard Graduate School of Education hosts the Making Caring Common project and provides a survey. That survey was given. There were 922 students from Massac that completed the survey. 41% of the students who do not identify as heterosexual agreed that discrimination based on sexual orientation is a problem at the school. Taking that information, carrying forward, another survey was administered to the students. 687 responded. 7.6% of the 687 that responded said that they had been the target of slurs based on their sexual orientation. 27.9% of the 687 that responded said that they had witnessed examples of students using slurs against someone's sexual orientation. And it was that data was used, and I believe what Ian carried forward in
From the creation of that club, that's a combination of staff members and students addressing those issues.
Wow. Staggering. I mean,
There was a GLAD, I could be wrong, there was a GLAD support group at Massac several years ago, and it just and I'm not negating anything. I'm just conversation. It dissipated because there was no need for it. Is that correct? At that time,
It may have. I'm not sure. I know that there's they had. I don't know when Glad was here. I don't know if that was.
It's near and dear to my heart too.
Yeah, there was the Gay Straight Alliance that was here for a while. I believe it was still here now.
I thought it was too. I could be wrong. But
When my child was here, Mark Schwartz said that it dissipated because nobody felt they needed it and people weren't going. So, I think as I clearly support the LGBTQ community very much. I really do, and I've got my own personal reasons as well. And I'm on the policy committee, and we need to make we need to make the right decision for our community here, and we need to look at what's in the best interest of our students in our district, and creating a needed policy and getting in front of it is something. Maybe it's underreported. It didn't seem like with the incidences that were happening that it seemed that that we weren't having an issue here with that, is, you know, and maybe it is underreported and everything, and, you know, wanting to be supportive, absolutely. You know, it's heartbreaking hearing that stuff. And I've been in that conversation that you had back in October. Was it 2011, did you say?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I already, you know, I couldn't be more happy and proud. Like, that wasn't a negative for me to hear that at all. And I want everybody to feel comfortable in their own skin. Obviously, the concern is, you know, creating a policy that exposes our district to litigation. It was funny that you mentioned that for the director of finance, and I'm like, I think there's gonna be a lot less litigation over the director of finance than what we could be doing here, you know, with this. That's the concern. You don't wanna be a trailblazer just if it's an unnecessary, if we need it, we need it. But if we don't, why are we exposing ourselves to that?
Whatever.
Wait,
Sorry.
hold on. People hands up. Alan?
What litigation would we be exposing ourselves to?
So if we're, I mean, I think the end goal is to create a policy. However,
Yes.
we're gonna word it to do it through the proper channels. The end goal is to create a policy. So we're gonna create a policy without like legislation having occurred and without, you know, the guidance that we normally have for policies.
There is guidance. I mean, there is, like I said, there's 27 pages from the SDE. There is statute that was passed in 2011 by the General Assembly, including gender identity and sexual orientation and different aspects of the law. There is no federal policy. That's a whole other conversation. There is guidance. There is law.
I appreciate your passion.
There is, being proactive is a good thing. We shouldn't wait for the complaints to come. We need to get ahead of them. That's what this is doing.
Okay.
Jay?
Yeah, I'm a little confused. You asked Jack to share Ian's report. Wasn't Ian's report recent? Wasn't that something
Yes.
like last year? 2 years ago?
They started the club this year, so it had to be passed
So
this year.
This is it. They might have had a club that disbanded, but Ian Lowe's proven that there is a need for this. Thus, the class that we approved and he's offering. Number one.
Not a class.
Not a class.
This is a club.
Club. Number two, Nick hasn't asked for any policy to be passed. He hasn't specifically said A, B, C, D, E, F. He just said he wants to bring it up to the policy committee. The policy committee, the three of us, the four of us, with Jack, we sit and we talk, and then we bring it to you guys. But Nick hasn't. Have you given us a list of what you want included in this?
Suggestions, but it's
but-
up to the policy committee.
So every time we talk about litigation and forging ahead with laws that you haven't broached any of that yet, unless I'm not hearing.
No.
Okay, I'm confused.
So what Nick's saying, what the resolution is gonna mandate is that the policy committee has to come up with something.
Right, with something.
That's today.
With
Okay?
some.
That's today. And then when's the policy committee is gonna meet in September?
Right.
Right. Okay. So do we think that there's going to be legislation at the state level around this issue or around this topic that's different than any of the other protected classes that we don't have specific policies for? So race, religion, socioeconomic status, gender, national origin, all of that stuff that is included as part of the protected classes within multiple policies that we have. Okay, do we think that something is going to come out between now and September that the policy committee is going to be able to then act on to treat it separately, to treat it as something that we can no longer just put gender identity expression as part of a policy? It needs to be its own policy.
Policy. I think you're writing too much into it. Are you planning to write a 100-page policy on transgender? I mean,
no, but we're gonna come up with a
we're gonna come up with restrooms or class trips or one or two things, but I didn't.
You're gonna come up with a policy for transgender.
Right.
Okay. are you then going to come up with a separate policy for each of the other protected classes? Is there a basis in law at the state level that says that you need to come up with a policy for transgender, and you need to come up with a policy for any of the other protected classes? If there's not, they're all included in the existing policies. From a procedural standpoint, how the district, how the administration determines how to enact these policies and carry out these policies, those are the procedures of the school. That's not the policy to get into this and that, because all of the protected classes are already included in the policies that we have. I'm concerned about starting to do this breakout without specific legislation that says this is what you need to conform to, and then get into details about how the district's going to run that, operate that. You know, Jerry, that we don't include procedures as part of the policies.
You're right.
Okay.
You're absolutely right.
Okay.
Wait.
That's it.
Go ahead.
Whichever. Who was?
I think what George is saying is what we need to explore first, right? So maybe what we need to say to policy committee is explore the pros and cons of creating a separate policy, or include it in, or we widen or expand our current policy that protects all of those classes, because that's the process and that's the concern. We're saying that this issue is important, no doubt, but we're putting this issue above all the other protected classes by coming up with a separate policy, perhaps. And who are we going to upset? Well, hey, I'm race, I want my own policy. I'm socioeconomic, I want my own policy. So this is a phenomenal discussion, and I think if there's anything to go back to policy committee to revisit, it should be the pros and cons of what George is saying. What are we, everything has to be legal and vetted, right? So I don't have a problem telling the policy committee to revisit this, and what are the pros and cons of coming up with a separate policy that doesn't include the other classes? Is that going to get us into dangerous territory, or are we going to be okay with this as step A? And then if so, then step B is, hey guys, we can create this policy and not have these issues. Maybe we just take it in steps, but that goes back to Nick and his motion, and we just maybe slow it down a little bit and we go one step at a time.
Nick.
No protected class is being put above another protected class. We do not need to take steps. At least one district, Stamford, adopted this policy. As I've said, we don't have to use the CABE policy as a sample, but there has been a CABE sample policy on the books on this issue since 2013. I'd like to read for you very briefly from CABE's backgrounder on transgender students. Quote, "Policy is a proactive way of addressing concerns before they arise. Many specific issues arise regarding transgender students in the school setting. These issues include, but are not limited to, such areas as privacy, official record keeping, names and pronouns, gender segregated activities, student information systems, restroom and locker accessibility, physical education classes, intramural and interscholastic sports, and dress codes. This is considered a recommended, quote, good practice policy for inclusion in a district's policy manual," end quote. This is a needed policy. These children are here now. There are things that in the sample policy that are not covered in other policies under general anti-discrimination practices or anti-discrimination laws, whether they be state, federal, or at the local level. And we are following the process that our attorney has laid out, and this is something that is needed, that we do need to do it. We have just under, I think, about 1,000 students here at Massac. And not to get too professory on you, but in the world of statistics, 1,000 is always a good sample size. When you get beyond 1,000 when you're doing a survey, you really don't gain anything. If we have a population of 1,000 here, there's a very, very good chance that at least 15 to 20 students at Massac are transgender. and upwards of 100, maybe a little less than that, 90 to 100 are part of the LGBTQ plus community. Right now, that's just at Massick. We're not talking about anything else that we could see at K-8. This is needed. I don't think this would open us up to any litigation. As a matter of fact, I think it would lessen the probability of litigation, because if there was a complaint made, we could point to the policy that we passed where we address these issues.
Can I just ask, I thought I asked this previously to Jack and Joe. I thought Stanford did not pass this policy.
Stanford did adopt this policy. The Board of Education did adopt it at the end of March.
But there were other towns that did not, because their attorney told them not to, and that's why my hand was up. It was, I think Stanford did, and then there were other towns that didn't.
I'm not aware of
because
other
their attorneys
towns
told them not
that,
to.
I'm not aware of other towns that didn't adopt it because the attorneys said not to, but I do believe that, you know, we obviously would need to pass any policy that comes to us for review before our attorney, who could then decide. He's already seen my resolution that discusses this issue. He didn't address the merits of the resolution, just the process. But this has been adopted by another board, and as I've said, this has been on the books for 8 years.
Okay.
Could I ask another question? Because I'm always the guy watching the time. It's 10:30. I'm trying to look at my phone here too.
Happy to stay as long as needed.
You could, right? Yeah. Do we continue this discussion? Do we have to vote on this tonight? I know there's a motion on the floor, and I respect it. I'd like to discuss this more. You know, my personal investment in this, and I just want to make sure that we're going about it the right way. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know if right now I'm ready to vote yes or no.
I agree.
You don't have to vote. It can be tabled. There is a motion.
I think for me, I need to talk about it a lot more.
The process is being followed. The policy committee's had this on their agenda since March. I don't think.
It wasn't that it was ignored. It's been
discussed.
addressed. It's been addressed.
It's not that we're
You
not
had an answer,
discussing
you had
it,
a
Nick. We
response,
discussed
and-
it at the policy committee.
Yeah, it's
Then-
not like we blew it off. You know what I mean?
I understand that, but if you've already discussed it, then I don't believe there's any need to table this right now. There's no need to wait any longer on this. We need to get started.
Even
But
Jerry said at the
could I just play devil's advocate? If people are not prepared to vote and it goes down, it can't be brought back up again unless the people who are in the quote unquote, just like we had previously on the whole food thing, bring it back up. So I'm just playing devil's advocate. Is it worth having it go down because people would like to, because it is a huge topic.
Yeah.
Is it worth going, is it worth having a vote go down because people are asking for more time to consider and think about that?
I've listened to everything that you said, and I heard it, and I want to think about it.
So that's all my 2 cents. I'm just playing devil's advocate there.
If the motion fails, I can change my vote to no and move to reconsider at the next meeting.
No, if the motion goes down and you vote yeah, you have to, if the motion,
I can see how many hands go up for yes, and then either add a fifth
Yeah,
vote.
but I guess what I'm saying is, could we table this for next meeting so that
Not to blow it off.
we can have some discussion, we can have some more public discussion. That's what I'm saying. I'm throwing out there.
I agree, because for me, what
Is
I'm
there a rush that
struggling
we have to
with
settle this
is
tonight?
that we have a policy committee, right? I don't I guess I'm kind of lost in all this. I understand this is near and dear to your heart, and believe me, I have a family member, so I completely support this subject. I'm struggling personally is that how do we get to this point? We have a policy committee that puts policy in place. It's not like it was not discussed in policy, correct?
It was tabled.
It was tabled, but it was a discussion, correct?
Yes.
And it wasn't voted down.
Right, it wasn't voted down, it was just tabled.
Right, so he's bringing it up.
Right, so what I'm trying to understand is that because it was tabled, you did not like that decision, so you brought it forth to us to get it back on the committee, correct?
Correct, also.
That's all I want to know. So for policy, I have a question. If you wanted to bring this up, again, how do you bring it up? How do you bring up a topic on this table? Can anybody bring it up?
No, policy would just
That's
put
what I
it back
mean.
on the
We would just
agenda.
put it
But that's
back
what
on
I'm
our
saying.
agenda.
So that's
When
my
we decided-
question.
yeah.
If somebody on the policy committee said, let's revisit this in September, what is this doing versus what that would do?
We don't need a vote.
That's what I'm just
We didn't decide how long it was tabled.
But
Christine,
that's-
I understand what you're
no, but
saying,
that's what I'm
there was
asking.
no
Somebody-
calendar date.
Right.
You
There's
just said,
yeah, there's no calendar date.
Correct.
But there's also, it's not removed completely from
Right, that's what
consideration.
I'm trying to
So in
understand.
September, we could bring
could
it back
come
up,
So
or
you
the
don't need
following
us to
policy
say it,
committee, we could bring it
right?
back up.
You don't need us as a board to say, put it on the committee. You as a committee, policy, people on the policy can say, put it on for September to rediscuss, correct?
Right, what this resolution would do is to,
Motion would do.
The motion.
the motion.
Would instruct that a
would
policy
instruct that the
had to
policy
be-
has
Has
to
to
take
be.
up,
But if
and
a-
has to create a policy.
Right, so that's the difference versus saying somebody on the policy committee, since they put it back on in September for discussion.
The other issue is that the policy committee is a subset of 3 of this entire board.
Mhm.
And so there is a chance, there is a probability that a majority of the board, 5 members of the board, feel that a policy should be created, and none of those members of a 5-member majority are members of the policy committee. So the motion was to see if there was a majority of the board. Perhaps there would be no overlapping members that were in the majority on the board that were on the policy committee that wanted to see this policy brought to the board for full review. But with that being said, and with the hour being late, it seems I don't have the votes, and so I have to accept the table.
I think you have a consensus amongst us that it should come up for discussion again.
Absolutely.
I don't see what is going to change from when the policy committee tabled it to July 16th to our next meeting to September 8th. So if this has to be shelved until the composition of the board changes, then so be it. But I will continue the advocacy and be at every policy committee meeting.
Yeah, I don't think anybody is saying, hey, we don't want a policy or we don't want to do it. I think some people are saying, listen, we got this stuff over the weekend. We don't have all our information because it was a lot. And I'm not trying to paraphrase. And I think some people are just saying, listen, we're fine with the policy, but we just want to table it because we're asked to do something so monumental of this, and we're doing it without any information.
Right.
Like, you know, a lot of times we have a first review, then a vote because of the fact that it is so big. Like policies, we don't vote on policies first time out. We always
and to
have
force it upon the policy committee to take it up at the September meeting. And the way that the document was written, it was like, then as soon as you meet on September 8th, you need to adopt policy and you need to send it back to the board. It's like the timetable needs to be, for some reason, between now and November, and I'm not getting that. So that was my question before as well, is what's going to change between now and September when the policy committee meets that says, okay, now we have what we need in order to do this, and the policy committee can absolutely do it then. So I agree with Dave's point. I think it requires more discussion. The policy committee has tabled it. The policy committee in no way, and there was no discussion at the policy committee that said, we're not doing this, this is not right, we're against this, right? It was, we're going to table this for now. It's tabled at the policy committee. It's before the board tonight. The board can decide to either vote on it or we can table it for future discussion. If people don't feel like they have all the information and this is going too fast or it's being forced, then I would recommend that we have additional discussion on it.
What information can I provide you? How long is it going to take? What can I give to you for you to start investigating creating this policy? That's to anybody.
Or in September, are we just going to be told that there's no legislation dictating what we set, so now we're just going to wait until the state comes up with legislation?
Jerry, when we were in the policy committee meeting, we had a consensus 100%
I
to
don't
table
really-
it, and you've had time since then to digest
Right,
it
and I
sleep on
digested it,
and
I said that. I said I digested, and I totally.
Right,
We're asking for the same.
But I'm just gonna, here, when was that discussion for policy
May.
committee?
May.
What are we in? June?
June, yeah.
Who of us who are not on the committee, policy committee, just got this information? So just like you, Jerry, said
I
you needed
understand.
time, why are we not allowed the same respect to have the amount of time? I think that's a fair thing.
I think the difference was, it's been said by certain members here that they want legislation. We never said it policy that we were waiting for a law to drop on us. So I think the difference is, I had the time to digest it, not looking for any outside information but my own. What's in my head. I'm just
And
still
Christine said
wondering.
This is brand new information.
But
for
I'm
the
just saying
non-policy
is that
committee
as
people, and give us
non-policy
some time.
members, we got this information
I
over the
understand.
weekend.
I
And we are
understand.
now being, here's the thing, for me personally, I don't care what the subject is. To me, what I'm struggling with too is the fact that we're being asked as a board to dictate to the policy committee to take on a policy. So regardless of what the topic is, it could be safety, it could be whatever.
Nutrition.
It could be anything.
True.
Is that what we want to do as a board, is dictate to policy what to take on?
And what
That's
the
the
timetable
difference.
is.
And
That's
what the
what I
timetable
struggle
is.
with.
And what the
That-
And
timetable
that's
is.
my point, is that this has nothing to do with the subject itself, because I trust the members of the board on the policy committee to come up with policy and bring it forth to the rest of us. It has nothing to do with that. For me, the struggle is that we as a board are now entering new territory, or being told to tell the policy committee to do something. In regard, like I said, it does not have anything to do with the subject itself.
No, I understand that.
It has to come down
Chris,
to the. right.
trust me, I know that.
Believe me.
I-
And again, and then when you just get the information over the weekend and are expected to turn it around and
It's a
try to
fair point.
digest
It's-
it,
it's
it's a lot to ask for
It's a
somebody.
fair point.
It's very fair.
Yes. It's a fair
So
point.
could I ask for this then to be on the July 16th agenda for further discussion of the board?
What information do people feel they need?
Well, I think the point of the matter
I mean,
is,
is there a book or?
no, but I think the point of the matter is people have asked because they had, like a Christine, who has not had, oh crud, I'm running low, had time to digest it. They want to think about it and have time to digest it. When we have a policy come, and I'm just going to say this, when we have a policy come before a board, we never vote on it that night. We read the policy, we say this is the first review, the next meeting we always have the vote so that everybody can understand. The policy committee presents it, everybody can ask questions, they can think about it, and the next time we vote. And I think what they're saying is, we just got this information, but you're asking us to act on it immediately
And you're
without
asking- and
being
again-
able to, by having an hour and a
with all
half
fairness, that's how
discussion.
you make the changes. By all fairness, with what you're saying, that's how we've been able to improve, like Title IX. When we just made it, that's how, I understand what you're saying. By sitting there and thinking about, you have the first, then we have the vote, and they have that time period where they can think about what it is. And that's how we've made some of the changes that we, which are positive
right.
changes.
Yes, the revisions.
Right. And I don't think they're saying, oh, I don't want to do it. They're saying is, I only got this information. I should be afforded the opportunity, like Jerry, who had time to digest it and think about it. I can't do that being presented something in an hour and a half and then asked to vote on it.
Right, and to me, this has nothing to do with the topic. It really has to do with the procedure and the process in place.
Good point.
Are we setting a precedent by allowing any one of us to take a topic near and dear to our hearts and asking board members to force it onto policy to take it up?
I couldn't agree.
That's ultimately what it comes down to. This has nothing to do with the topic of what it comes down to process and procedures and what we're doing. We are asking the board to force policy onto policy committee versus how it's done now is the policy committee gets the policy, makes the changes, presents it, and does all their due diligence. That's really ultimately what we're voting on. This isn't on the topic of transgender.
It's not
This
about
is
supporting
it has nothing to do with supporting it. It has to do with changing the way we present policy to policy committee. That's really what this comes down to. That's what this vote is about.
And the timeline in which we need to do it.
Correct.
So Jerry knows full well that we've taken on policies such as the nutrition policy, what was the other one? The field trip policy.
trip.
They take
meeting after meeting after meeting to get it right and bring it to the board. There's multiple discussions. Title IX is not done all at once.
No, we had to
right?
table it a few times.
So that's the thing that I don't want to put the policy committee into a position where we are mandated to come up with something, whatever that something is going to look like at the end of the day. But we have to deliver something, and we have to deliver something by a certain time frame.
Right, and if we're gonna do it, and you're gonna be trailblazers, don't you wanna do it right and put in the time and the process to really look at everything and not rush it? Why, you know what we don't wanna do that.
I absolutely agree with you about that. The motion I made this evening had nothing to do with the timetable, by the way. All I said, motion was that the Board of Ed instructs the policy committee to create this policy. And Christine, to answer your question, if a majority of the board believes that there should be a policy, then the board, as our attorney said, should be able to dictate that in general.
Right, I understand what you're saying. What I'm saying is that we are setting a precedent then that I can bring up something near and dear to my heart, and the policy committee tables it, and I come to the board and say, I want you to look at it for the policy.
If you have 4 other members and yourself who agree with that, then I don't see the issue with that. That our procedure allows for that to happen.
But see, I personally, if the committee that we have forth, the policy committee, is in charge of it, and they tabled it, they didn't kill it, they didn't end it, they just tabled it for now. I trust that board is doing the right thing. They're they're representative of the Board of Ed.
Looks like I need to get on the policy committee. This is a very long night. I will withdraw my motion. I would respectfully request through the chair that this item appear on our July 16th full board agenda for further discussion.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn?
Yes, second.
All right, any discussion? Nope. All in favor? Thank you, and we will have this on our next agenda.